Greetings, humans. You have entered the Command Zone, your destination for all aspects of Elder Dragon Highlander. Enjoy your stay.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Command Zone podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Weeks.
How's it, everybody? It's Josh Lee Kwai.
Today, we are talking about the most powerful new commanders in the brand new Lost Caverns of Ixalan set. There's a ton of new commanders, as there always seem to be these days. And we're going to be talking about the ones that we think have the chance to be the most powerful builds in the set. But before we get into that, of course, any of the cards that you can pick up today, you can pick those up while supporting the show at cardkingdom.com/command. Card Kingdom is a great place to pick up all of the singles and sealed product you're looking for. Lost Caverns of Ixalan is a super sweet set. It is full of these precons, which are awesome. The value is really, really strong. If you have any interest in them, there's a lot of good card value in there, and you can get those at Card Kingdom while supporting the show. Plus, all of the cards that go along with those commanders and the backup commanders, which we are talking about today. Again, pick them up from Card Kingdom. They have the professionalism and the selection to get all of the cards you're looking for in one safe package, safe on your doorstep. Again, cardkingdom.com/command.
Yeah, you definitely want to pre-order some of these Lost Caverns cards. This set looks very powerful. And then once you get those cards, of course, you want to protect them. Just go to ultrapro.com/command to pick up all your game accessories. You can get playmats, you can get deck boxes, you can get sleeves, you can get dice, you can get wall scrolls. I can probably think of other things that the editors will have to put on screen, but I'll stop now. Yeah, ultrapro.com/command is also great because there's all kinds of discounts on their site. I don't sign up for newsletters. I sign up for ULTRAPRO's newsletter, though, because of the discounts. They just happen frequently enough, and they're large enough discounts. They're not, there's bigger than 10 or 20%. There's often very big discounts. And they are coming out soon with the Apex sleeves. We've kind of been hyping them up recently, and we're all really excited about them in the office because we got our hands on some. ULTRAPRO gave us some early, and they are printed sleeves with an incredible amount of durability. They have a sweet shuffle feel.
They feel good when you're shuffling them.
You really haven't seen a printed sleeve, or I guess felt a printed sleeve like these before. So ULTRAPRO just killing it from all angles. Again, ultrapro.com/command. And then, of course, the final way to support all of our content is directly if you go to patreon.com/command. We have all kinds of perks for our patrons. One of the really cool perks, and you were part of this recently, Rachel, is we have a exclusive series called Turn Talk.
Yeah, after a game of extra turns, we get together with all the players who played and talk about what would have happened if you had drawn one more card, if you had, if I needed the land at that moment, then I could have done this and stopped you. It's a ton of fun. It's all off the cuff immediately after the game ends.
Yeah.
You've got to check it out.
Yeah, it's one of, personally, my favorite piece of content that we do. If I'm ever not in a game, I love listening to the Turn Talk of the people that work, because I just learn so much from just hearing how other people think about and what they think about while they're playing. So again, patreon.com/command zone is the place to go if you want to support our content that way. And of course, another perk is we shout out one lucky patron every single episode.
This one is dedicated to Alex Quintero. Alex,
you rock.
You do rock.
And one more thing that's relevant to the patrons and will eventually be relevant to everybody out there. We have finally made a tough decision.
Yeah.
It was tough. It was really hard.
The votes are tallied.
Yep. So we did Game Nights auditions. I guess it's almost 2 months ago now. We got hundreds of submissions. We had a little committee here in the office. We narrowed it down further. Finally did a final vote tally. We had a lot of really, really good entries. This year was probably the toughest one ever.
Man, it was so wonderful. Thank you to everybody who submitted, because the videos are awesome to receive.
I got to say, there was a lot of people that easily could have been chosen. It's not like we chose, quote unquote, the top two. But there was a lot of people that, flip of a coin. It could have gone to many, many people. So people did a great job. So we are going to announce the winners of those auditions and who the fan guests will be next year on Game Nights. We're going to do that at the end of this episode after we're done with the review.
Stick around.
Yeah, so stick around, or if you auditioned, we know what you're doing. You're skipping forward right now, but at least come back to hear us talk about the cards after. Okay. And before we get into the main talk, one more thing. We just want to mention we have a TikTok now.
Yeah, we're ticking. We're talking. You can see Game Nights and Command Zone content on TikTok. You can see our reels on Instagram, and we're releasing shorts right here on YouTube.
Oh, yeah, we did an outtake one with Lady Danger.
Yeah, trying to catch the spider.
It was so fun. Yeah, that was super fun.
It's a ton of fun, and we're having a lot of fun making them.
Yeah.
But without further ado.
Okay, yep.
It is time to get into the main topic. We are talking about some of the new, most powerful commanders from Lost Caverns of Ixalan. Of course, power can be a little tricky to measure. You're not going to nail all of these, but we talked about the ones that we're the most excited to build and really feel like they have the most powerful, interesting synergies in the set. A little caveat, we are doing our best with the pronunciations. We have done the research that we can do. Obviously, not all of these cards have come out yet, so some of them we are making educated guesses. But if we are incorrect, please correct us.
Yeah. And sometimes there's not consensus either, because they are not necessarily all real names that exist in the world now.
Right.
So
we're doing our best.
Okay.
I promise we're trying.
All right. On that note, the first one, I'll start out. I can do it.
You can do it.
The first one is Anim Pakal,
Yeah.
Thousandth Moon. So Anim is 1, a red and a white, for a 1/2 legendary creature. Of course, human soldier. Whenever you attack with one or more non-gnome creatures, put a 1/1 counter on Anim Pakal, then create X 1/1 colorless gnome artifact creature tokens that are tapped and attacking, where X is the number of +1/+1 counters on Anim Pakal.
Okay.
So ostensibly, you attack with Anim the first time, gets a 1/1 counter, makes one gnome, 1/1/1 gnome that's attacking. But
we're not just going to do one counter.
Yeah.
We're here to put 10, 15, 20 counters on this thing.
Right. Once it gets out of control, then, well, I guess I suppose it's out of control.
Anim Pakal is also a super cool character. She rides on this like flying war bat.
She looks
and I wish
super
she
sweet.
made bats because they're awesome.
She makes like zombie robot gnomes is what it looks like.
Yeah, but she's like a bat priestess.
It looks
She's
like
really
kind of
cool.
like the gnomes from World of Warcraft. If you've ever been in Gnomeregan, and they have a lot of machinery there. So
I
there
haven't,
you go.
but you know. So
I'm sure that's a coincidence.
Yeah.
Just a coincidence.
Of course, the first thing that we have to talk about with Anim is +1/+1 counters. How are we getting Anim as big as we possibly can here? And the first answer, of course, is Cathar's Crusade.
Yeah, I think that totally makes sense, because it's making tokens, which will then enter the battlefield and put +1/+1 counters on Anim, but also on the tokens.
On all the other tokens. So the tokens are huge, and when like 3 enter, they all get 3 counters, and she gets counters, and it makes her next turn even scarier. The interesting thing about red and white as a counter strategy is red and white is not super good at putting a ton of counters on one thing.
That's more a thing green does, right?
Yeah, it's better at putting like one counter on all your things.
Yeah.
So
that's definitely a white thing. Put 1/1 counter on all your stuff,
Right,
which is
it's
less
like-
good for Anim Pakal.
Right, because you want them on her so you can make more gnomes. Also on the gnomes is okay.
Yeah, that's not bad, but you'd rather, I think, if you had a choice, put 10 on to her and then attack and
make
get 10
10
extra things.
Yeah. So it's a little bit tricky, but we looked up a couple of things that are good at putting multiple counters onto one target. And I wanted to mention Agitator Ant, which doesn't seem super busted, but it's at the beginning of your end step, each player may put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature they control. Goad each creature that had counters put on it this way. So you do goad your own creature, but it wears off on your turn. It doesn't matter.
Well, you have to attack with Anim anyway.
Yeah, you gotta. She's your
not doing
non-gnome
anything
lady.
otherwise, yeah.
You're loading her up with counters. Send her to war. She's a soldier. But this is a really great way to start putting multiple counters on a thing every turn while giving you a little bit of protection.
Yeah, true. I mean, the downside is that their creatures are growing too, but presumably the fact that their creatures have a couple extra counters on them isn't like synergy in their deck. It's just like, bigger stuff. Where you're like, my synergy is going, I'm making more gnomes and stuff like that. So
also, if they're putting counters on their stuff, those things are attacking, so they're not necessarily blocking.
And they're attacking your
creatures.
enemies, right? So,
we'll take it.
Yeah. There are still some good cards, though, that I think are worth playing that add +1/+1 counters to everything. A new one is Virtue of Loyalty, which is the white virtue from Wilds of Eldraine. It can either make a knight on its adventure side, or it's an enchantment that puts a +1/+1 counter on all your creatures at the beginning of your end step. So, and it untaps them too, which I like the untap part especially, because it's like, I attack with Anim, I make, let's say modest 4 or 5 gnomes. They're tapped and attacking, and now bloop, 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 that's the game night sound, and all 6 of my things are untapped and bigger and sort of ready to defend, but also ready to attack next turn.
Yeah, I like Virtue of Loyalty a lot, and don't underestimate the Knight in this deck because it is a non-gnome creature that you're happy just to attack with.
Oh, that's a really good point. Yeah, because I didn't even think about it. You don't actually have to attack with Anim for this to happen, right?
Yeah. It's
Whenever you attack with one or more non-gnome creatures, you put a 1/1 counter on Anim, and then you make the gnomes, but Anim could just sit there, actually.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah,
That's cool.
if you have the knight down before her and then put like on 2 and then Anim on 3, then you are set up to start making gnomes right away.
Yeah, that's interesting. That changes my outlook of the play pattern of the thing, actually. Okay, that's cool. That's really cool.
Similar to Agitator Ant, but also really good at putting +1 counters on one thing is Noble Heritage. This is a background for 1 and a white, so 2 mana. You can play this before Anim comes down. It says commander creatures you control have, when this creature enters the battlefield and at the beginning of your upkeep, each player may put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature they control. For each opponent who does, you gain protection from that player until your next turn. So of course, this does make their blockers a little bit bigger because it doesn't necessarily goad them, but you play this on 2, you play Anim on 3, she immediately has 2 counters on her. And then if you have a 1-drop, which I think are quite strong in this deck, you can start the chain and making 3 gnomes on turn 3.
Yeah, just right off the bat.
Really aggressive, really intense. And, that's assuming that your opponents even have a creature to put counters on. So I like Noble Heritage. It starts stacking up those counters really, really fast, and it's cheap.
I don't think we need to talk about like all the +1/+1 counter stuff that's out there because there's a lot, but you're definitely going to have that be a part of the deck. And of course, you're going to have a lot of the synergistic +1/+1 counter cards like Ozolith. Mm-hmm. If you ever mention the word counters, then just assume we said Ozolith. You can have Ozolith. There's like Lae'zel. There's Basri's Lieutenant, which you put down with, which I think is interesting and smart, and is also a non-gnome and creates non-gnomes.
So if you're putting counters on all of your gnomes, this card's really sweet because it says that anything with a counter on it dies, it turns into a knight, which is a better token than a gnome in this deck. It's a great thing to attack, but also it makes it a little bit more inconvenient for your opponents to block because they're like, well, if I kill it, it turns into a better thing. I like Basri's Lieutenant in this deck, especially because it has protection from multicolored, which sometimes makes it a really, really great attacker.
Yeah. Another thing we put down here is that it's possible that this could be a good home for like a modular themed deck.
Yeah, this is cute.
Yeah, because modular creatures, when they die, they put their counters onto other artifact creatures, and the gnomes are artifact creatures. And I think in that build, you would want a few ways to turn Anim into an artifact. Mm-hmm. So you could choose for the modular creatures to die, put their counters onto Anim, make even more gnomes, and then you would have, some synergy around artifact creatures. Steel Overseer probably goes in this style of deck, and then Arcbound Ravager would make their head spin. That's really makes it
really tough math when there's an Arcbound Ravager on the board.
Especially when you have a bunch of tokens. So you're like, I attack with these 9 things, and they're like, the Arcbound can probably just kill me, so I have to block that. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes the math really, really messy, especially if you have an untapped Liquid Metal Torque or something that's just like, well, Anim's going to be huge, and we're making even more gnomes this time. Of course, this is a token deck and you're in white. We've got some very strong ways to double the amount of tokens that you're making. Anointed Procession, Mondrak, Glory, Dominus, and the new Aujertak, Deepest Foundation.
People are really excited about this card.
It says triple job.
Yeah, it's crazy.
4 white for a 6/6 legendary creature god with vigilance. If 1 or more creature tokens would be created under your control, 3 times that many of those tokens are created instead. When Aujertak dies, return it to the battlefield, tapped and transformed under its owner's control. All of these gods, the Ojer cycle, flip into temples, and have some sort of clause to flip it back over.
Yeah, they turn into lands, and then you can turn them back into the god. The important side is the front side of this one, and people are obviously very excited because it's a 3x instead of a 2x. We're used to parallel lives and possession, but
if you have 2 counters on Anim, you make 6 gnomes. That seems fine.
Yeah. Yeah. This section, we're going to talk about the gnome of it all because I think you can lean into that part of it as well. Mm-hmm. We also put down Divine Visitation, which I think is quite incredible.
Good.
Yeah, because it also creates non-gnomes that will then trigger Anim because they're going to kill Anim.
Yeah, they gotta.
So then you're going to want to, put Anim back out and attack immediately. And maybe you have like some other way to put a couple counters on real quick and get it going again. But having your gnomes come in, even if they're only 2 or 3, as 4/4 angels, changes the math by quite a bit.
And remember, this is a replacement effect, so those angels enter tapped and attacking. They are impactful right away. So Divine Visitation is a kill-on-sight card in this deck, I think.
That turn where they're looking at it and they're like, well, there's only 3 counters on it. They're going to untap. They're going to attack. They're going to make 3 gnomes. We can live with it. And you go Divine Visitation, go, and they're like, oh, it's 3/4/4 flyers.
That's fine. I can't imagine that.
Oh, never mind.
Your
I'm
problem.
thinking 15. Yeah, I didn't see that coming. Yeah, Strionic Resonator I think is another card that is pretty good. You can just copy the triggered ability on Anim and just make.
Yeah.
Again, it will work out like an activated Anointed Procession kind of.
Or double the Xolotyac trigger and put double the amount of counters on Anim.
Yeah, you could even double up like the Virtue of Loyalty trigger or something like that.
Oh,
so
yeah.
it has a lot of usages in this deck. That's just not just Anim. Yeah.
Yeah. Lots of great ways to make double the amount of gnomes. Of course, like 1/1s entering tapped and attacking doesn't necessarily sound super impactful unless you have a way to make them bigger or a way for them to do damage when they enter, because a lot of the time your opponents are like, I've got like 2/2/2s, I can just block 2 of them and it's fine. But if you have, of course, things that trigger when creatures enter the battlefield, they are doing damage right away. This is where your Impact Tremors and your Perforoses come in big.
Perforos is particularly good because it also has a pump spell for all your creatures on it.
Right.
So it's like, okay, attack, make 5 gnomes, deal 10 to
damage.
everybody. Now I'll activate Perforos twice and they're actually 3/3s. Like, you can, it's easy to forget that part of Perforos, but every once in a while in decks like this, it comes in handy.
I really like Alibu in this deck. This card is lethal.
Alibu's just been way better than, like, every time Alibu's out, I'm like, man, that card's ridiculous.
When this came out, I feel like everybody was looking at Osgear and was like, yeah, it's a cool...
Osgear is sweet, by the way.
Osgear is awesome. It's like, oh, he's a sweet, like, Boros commander. We're excited. Boros doesn't have to attack anymore. And everybody ignored Alibu. And then all of a sudden, you play against one, and you're like, I scry 25 and I deal 25 to you.
You're like, what the heck?
Let me read it. It's 3 red, white for a 4/5 golem. Other artifact creatures you control have haste. Going to be great in this deck. And whenever one or more artifact creatures you control attack, Alibu Ancient Witness deals X damage to any target, and you scry X, where X is the number of tapped artifacts you control.
So, yeah, it reads weird because you would think that the gnomes don't attack, they enter tapped and attacking. But Alibu actually only cares about the number of tapped artifacts that you have.
As long as you have an artifact attacking, like a gnome from a previous turn or Alibu herself.
Yeah, that's another thing. I guess I didn't even really clock this, but it's whenever one or more artifact creatures you control attack, it doesn't even have to be Alibu that's attacking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the way that this happens is a little strange because you've got 2 attack triggers on Anim, Pakal and Alibu. You have to stack it so Alibu goes on the stack and then Anim, Pakal goes on the stack. But
so the gnomes get there first.
Yeah, but you have to name Alibu's target first anyway. So you have to, like, as the Alibu trigger goes on the stack, you have to declare a target. Then the Anim, Pakal trigger goes on the stack. You make all the gnomes. And then as you resolve Alibu's trigger, you have a lot more artifacts than you did when you named the target.
Right, because Alibu could be like, oh, I think I'm only dealing 1. And then, the gnomes appear and
you're like,
they're like, actually, I'm dealing 10. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to try scry 10 also.
Yeah, the fact they can hit creatures is what's nuts because you can just clear out blockers. It's just free removal spells.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then oftentimes, you just kill them with it too.
Yeah, she also counts like tapped mana rocks
Yep.
and like, it's so good. Ali was really powerful in this style of deck. I could also see you turning it into a more aristocrat-y build, which isn't something that you think about when you think about Boros, but Goblin Bombardment makes that very easy. And even cards like Hissing Iguanar, which says whenever another creature dies, you may have Hissing Iguanar deal 1 damage to target player or planeswalker. So it's a little blood artist on a lizard? He's a lizard. I like him.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, geez, if you had Impact Tremors and Goblin Bombardment, it becomes real fast.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. The next section, I was thinking, we skipped one. It's big gnomes is the next section.
Got to make the gnomes big.
Yeah, you got to make the gnomes big. How do you make them big besides just 1/1 counters?
I love this card. This next one is a combat trick, which is very much my style. It's Mercadia's Downfall. 2 and a red for an instant. Attacking creatures you control get +X/+O until end of turn, where X is the number of non-basic lands defending player controls.
Ooh, this is brutal because very often it's just like, I'll just take the 6 or whatever.
Yeah, I'm not going to block these 6/1/1s. And
you're like, actually you die though.
Yeah. Do you have 5 non-basic lands? Those are 6/6s. Uh-oh.
And just the kind of card that not very many people play, so people just do not expect to see it coming.
Yeah.
All the big overruns, for the most part, are sorcery speed. So
like, you're not worried about Chroma's Wills. They're 1/1s.
Yeah.
So...
And I worry about like Temur Battle Rage, but that's a singular big creature. You generally know, like, oh, there's an 18/18 coming at me. I gotta do something about that.
Right, yeah.
But when it's 6/1/1s, you tend to be like, all right, I'll just take it.
There's one more I wanted to mention because I really like him in my Pia Nalar deck, and it's Gross, Unstoppable
You just like the name.
Juggernaut. Yeah. It says, Juggernauts you control attack each combat if able.
It says it just like that, too.
Juggernauts you control can't be blocked by walls. And other creatures you control have base power and toughness 5/3 and are juggernauts in addition to their other creature types.
So all the gnomes become 5/3s.
5/3 gnome juggernauts.
Jeez Louise.
And they have to attack, but
They were tapped and
they were
attacking anyway.
attacking anyway.
Yeah.
I like Groz. He's 8 mana for an artifact creature, but in a deck like this, I think you probably have artifact synergies. Maybe you're running goblin welders, ways to get this into play without paying the full.
Yeah, cheating. Also, it is kind of Crater Hoofy.
Yeah.
And which is 8 mana as well. So you wouldn't play this if you don't have a lot of gnomes. But if you're in tapping, you've got 6 or 7 gnomes, the coast looks clear, and it looks like you're going to make about 6 or 7 more. That's a good time to play Groz, I'd say.
Pretty good.
Yeah. I was trying to think of sort of combo-tastic stuff to do, and at first I was like, oh, extra combats.
Yeah.
Because that is a red thing, and also we have an attack trigger, which generally we like extra combats in that scenario. However, I thought about the fact that, like, on the untap, the gnomes themselves do not have haste.
Right.
They enter tapped and attacking, but they can't attack on the other combats. Now, Anim could, or whatever your non-gnome that attacked the first time could. So you could still use extra combats as sort of a Strionic Resonator to just make another round, get another counter on Anim. So it could still be okay. But you can obviously solve that problem with haste.
Right.
So if you add anger or, any of the haste granters, this is going to get a lot better. But aggravated assault then I think sort of comes into play. And then you can sort of think about the altars and things like that. And now you can sack the gnomes to get the mana. Phyrexian Altar is obviously the best one because it makes colored mana. But I think even Ashnod's would work because aggravated assault is red, and 3 to activate. So just getting rid of that 3 might make it like, hey, I don't go infinite on combats. But if I'm making like 5 or 6,
combats.
yeah, maybe I get 4 combats. That's probably enough to like do a lot of damage or kill somebody. So I also think if you combine it with mana echoes, which is another thing that says when a creature enters the battlefield, you get mana equal to the amount of creatures that share a type with it.
Pretty sweet.
Yeah, so if you make, 5 gnomes, you get like 20 mana, and then,
now all you need is a Chandra's Ignition or some sort of mana sink like the aggravated assault.
Yeah. Or, you can always still just have like a Comet Storm in your deck too for those moments.
I like Exsanguinate. Not Exsanguinate. I like Exsanguinate.
I like Exsanguinate too.
I just say that sometimes.
I mean, it is technically true.
What's the one, the instant that cheats something into play that's like a fireball?
Oh,
it's exterminate. What is it called?
Dang it. I like that spell too.
Yeah, it's sweet. Electrodominance. That's it.
Electrodominance would be great because then you can also just cast another spell out of your hand.
You could cheat a Groz into play.
There you go.
With Electrodominance.
There you go. Oh, and in mid-combat, they turn into 5/3
what?
Juggernauts. Yeah, why not?
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, Mana Echoes is a little problematic because they are created in combat, so you need a lot of instants. But if you have enough in your deck, then it becomes very viable. Yeah. So to talk about something we mentioned at the start, I agree with you. I think 1-drops are really important if you think about the play sequencing of how this is going to roll out. So you're probably going to have a lot of mana rocks like most Boros decks do as your ramp. So you want 1-drops really badly because when you play Anim Pakal, which will still be turn 3, right? If you play a turn 2 mana rock, you just have 4 mana on turn 3. You want to attack on that, like the moment that she comes down. Well, you'll only have had 2 spots to do that, and that's when you have 1 mana on turn 1, or with that mana from the mana rock on turn 2. Now, of course, not every game do you start with the mana rock in your hand, but that is your ideal start. So I think 2-drops that can attack are sort of less good because you just don't have a window to cast them before Anim comes out than 1-drops. So I think you're going to want actually quite a bit of 1-drops. And if you think about it, even on turn 3 when you play Anim, there's 1 mana left. So you have 3 spots, turn 1, turn 2, and turn 3, where you're likely, if things go well, to have 1 extra mana. And so as many sort of Ragavans, Ginger Brutes.
I love Ginger Brute.
Yeah.
Just a 1-mana hasty thing that you can make evasive is such an issue.
Yeah, exactly. It can continue to hit. You've got 1/1 counter synergies. So later in the game, even it's a 5/5 6/6 because it's gotten some counters and you're just like, it's basically unblockable. Any amount of 1-drop that want to attack that you can put in this deck, I think are going to be really, really good for you to get out to those fast starts.
Yeah. For sure, you want to make sure that Commander gets working the moment she hits the battlefield because, like we said, they're going to have to remove her at some point. She's putting a lot of power on the board. All right, the next commander that we are going to talk about is the backup commander in the Vampire Precon. Her name is Carmen, Cruel Skymarcher. She's awesome. 3 white and a black for a 2/2 flying vampire soldier. Whenever a player sacrifices a permanent, put a +1/+1 counter on Carmen, and you gain 1 life. Whenever Carmen attacks, return up to 1 target permanent card with mana value less than or equal to Carmen's power from your graveyard to the battlefield.
Okay. Interesting, that last part is permanent, so you can do lands.
Yep.
That sneaky white ramp that they've been doing more and more of.
Yeah, it doesn't say land. It's not ramp.
Yeah.
It's permanence.
It says permanence. Carmen is a 5-drop, so it's not, I think you probably still do it sometimes, but it's not exactly early in the game when you normally want ramp to be. So that's, I think more often than with a lot of cards like this, you probably are getting real stuff, not just lands.
Right. I mean, this is a 5-mana commander that has to attack to trigger. So I think haste is going to be a huge deal in this deck. Like, obviously, Greaves and Swiftfoot Boots go really well with this kind of stuff. Plus, Carmen is a really, really powerful engine. Yeah. So I think she's going to eat removal as fast as they really can. It's not quite as fast of a clock as Sun Titan, but she does get really big, really fast, especially when you have free things you can sacrifice, like fetch lands, like treasures, all of these things that we are used to sacrificing in Commander already.
Yeah, I mean, I think a really good play pattern with Carmen, if you could draw it up, would be that you play her hopefully a little bit early because of mana rocks and things like that. But you play her, you suit her up with a Greaves or a Boots, you attack and I think it'd be best if you had a fetch land, cracked it, she becomes a 3/3, you gain 1 life, you attack, and you get that fetch land back out of the graveyard and into play as the recursion that you're doing. And now, even if she gets killed somehow, that feels like enough value. You've gotten about half your commander tax back, that you're not devastated. You didn't stick your neck out with 5 mana and you just got killed and nothing happened. You ramped a little, you started to do the thing. I mean, hopefully you can do better than that, but I think that's a decent floor.
Yeah, I mean, minimally you get an extra land untapped and then you've sort of paid 4 mana for her. But I think the real plan that you really want is just have a bunch of treasures on the battlefield, or maybe 3 treasures and a fetch land and something big in your graveyard to reanimate. You do want those Greaves. You want it to happen right away.
This would be the ceiling now.
Right, yeah. I mean,
it doesn't seem crazy.
Yeah, if you can reanimate a 3-drop or a 4-drop, now you have gotten twice as much of your mana worth for casting her and gain some life for your trouble.
Yeah, and you don't have to have that many treasures available to you to make that happen because she's a 2/2 already.
Right.
Yeah. Now, you wouldn't be able to spend the treasures on her when you cast her. You have to be able to cast her, have, let's say, a fetch land and 3 treasures. That's going to be 5 counters. She'll be a 5/5 at that point.
And that's plenty. It doesn't need to be insane on this first attack.
Yeah. Now, if you get a 5-drop out of your graveyard onto the battlefield, and she gets killed, you're totally fine because you paid 5 mana and got a 5 mana thing that's still there.
Yeah. And you soaked up a removal spell from them, which will do. So, of course, black and white are very good at treasures. Black Market Connections is great in this deck. It gives you a creature you could sack. It gives you a treasure you could sack. Deadly Dispute does double. It gives you both a sack trigger and a treasure.
Oh, that's nice because so it can put the thing that you're going to get back in.
Yeah, but when I play a deck like this, and I like really recursive, grindy white decks, I want as much as I possibly can on permanence, where I probably will run Deadly Dispute, but I would much rather have a Grim Hireling or even the Lotho, Corrupt Sheriff.
Yeah.
This is the one that whenever any player casts their second spell on their turn, you lose a life and get a treasure. You're not worried about the life in this deck at all. And you could have cast your commander and have treasures to spare.
Yeah, maybe even have enough treasure to use a couple to get Carmen out early, but still have a couple left. Yeah. I like that point about permanence, right? Because Carmen can't get Deadly Dispute out of the graveyard for you, but can get Grim Hireling for you. And that's the reason you want more permanence just in general. Yeah.
Yeah, just make sure that you have as many options as you possibly can. This one was fun. I haven't seen this one in play recently.
It turned out to be not as good as we thought it was going to be.
I know. Everybody got really excited about it. It's Life Insurance. 3 white, black for an enchantment with Extort, which I like Extort a lot in Commander, especially in a deck that might have life gain stuff going on. And whenever a non-token creature dies, you lose 1 life and create a treasure. So non-token makes this a little bit trickier to use, but it's anybody's non-token creature.
Yeah, and I think also this deck is not necessarily going to be real tokeny.
Yeah.
So it'll probably have actual creatures that are dying for the most part because you can't bring tokens back from the graveyard either.
Exactly.
So yeah, you're likely to be sacking some stuff, and that is kind of a section we're going to talk about here. So one of the treasure cards that's really, really good is Pitiless Plunderer.
Yeah, it goes along with sacking and makes treasures.
Yeah, and I think it's probably so good in the deck that, you're going to want to build some cards that kind of work well with it. Like Reassembling Skeleton goes really well with Pitiless Plunderer, because as soon as you have a sack outlet with Reassembling Skeleton, it almost pays for the fact that the skeleton comes back, because Reassembling Skeleton is 1 and a black for a 1/1, and then 1 and a black to return it from your graveyard to the battlefield.
And Pitiless Plunderer says whenever another creature dies, you make a treasure.
Yeah, so if you have an Ashnod's Altar, just that right there is already, you're gaining 1 mana every time. So you sack it to the altar. You've got 2 floating. You made a treasure because it died. And now you use a treasure on one of the mana that's floating to put the Reassembling Skeleton back in. That leaves you with 1 generic mana just laying there. And then you can just do this as many times, right? That's infinite colorless mana. But it also is an infinitely large Carmen
and
infinite life gain, because Carmen gains you the 1 life.
Ugh, oh my gosh.
And get anything out of your graveyard regardless of size now. Out,
when you attack.
And, attack and kill somebody probably too.
Yeah.
So you don't have to go infinite with Pitiless Plunderer. I know a lot of players and play groups, ourselves included, don't play with a lot of infinites. But again, like we always say, okay, you don't go infinite, just go a lot. And Pitiless Plunderer with a lot of things, Gravecrawler is another one if you have enough zombies. There's a bunch of stuff that you can sort of recur a bunch of times to just, because Carmen just doesn't care. Just sack something or the same thing over and over as many times as you can. And it doesn't have to be 1,000. It can be 6.
Yeah. And even if you're not building Carmen, it's good to know what infinite combos to expect in a commander deck. So if you're not building with combos, that makes a lot of sense, but you should know what pieces to be aware of. And Pitiless Plunderer is often a piece to be aware of.
It's the type of card that you definitely don't want a black deck to be untapping with.
Yeah. Teysa Karlov is another piece here where you would still need the free sack outlet, but now you have 2 treasures to bring this back, or the Gravecrawler.
They get a Plunderer and a Teysa, or you do.
Yeah,
it's probably over.
Big trouble.
I like Pawn of Ulamog as a stand-in for Pitiless Plunderer. Doesn't give the colored mana from the treasure, but does give a sackable object, which is is this a spawn? A spawn. I always get spawns and science mixed
They're
up.
the same. Yeah. What's 1 power in a commander game?
It's true. So because there are sort of interchangeable pieces and everything, there's probably a little package that goes around. And you just want sack and recursion anyway, so this is just all stuff you'd want in the deck. So there definitely could be a combo-tastic version of this deck that includes these pieces. The other way to go, or maybe even included with this
Speaking of combo-tastic.
Yeah, I think the Scrap Trawler, Mirror Retriever, Krark Clan Ironworks, Artifactocrats style stuff could also go in here, and that's also another just revolving door of sacrificing and getting stuff back.
Yeah, that's a very quick way to make your commander really big, make her a lethal commander damage threat, or just reanimate some huge nasty artifact. Not Blightsteel, because that one won't stay in your graveyard.
Yeah, sure.
But, some big artifact problem, there's lots of those. Like a Portal to Phyrexia, for example.
Well, and the thing about the Scrap Trawler sort of loops are they slowly dwindle down because you go down the CMC. You sack a 5 mana thing, you get a 4 mana thing back, and then you sack that and you get a 3 mana thing, and then you go through this thing and you're like, oh, but then I get this back, which returns something to the battlefield, and they start this over. But eventually, a lot of times you sort of dwindle down. Well, the thing about Carmen is she goes, cool, now at that point, I'll attack and bring back the big thing and start this
at the top
loop
again.
over. Yeah, which will be really, your sequencing and everything, and take a while, but is super, super powerful, obviously.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
For sure.
That's another way I think the deck could go.
It also goes very well with the treasure strategy, just having all of those artifacts in play. Just all of those cards go together really well. Of course, if you are building a black-white deck and you are using your graveyard, you're going to want your traditional recursion pieces that don't require you have your 5 mana attack trigger commander in play. Brought Back is a really great one that just takes 2 things that went to the graveyard this turn, brings them right back to the battlefield. One of my favorite cards ever is Syvin's Reclamation.
So good.
It brings a 3-drop or less permanent from your graveyard to the battlefield, and you can flash it back. Bring 2 things back. Really great in both of the strategies that we've talked about so far. Of course,
works with the fetch lands really well too.
Yeah. I usually use the first Syvin's Reclamation as ramp and the second one to bring back win con pieces or bring back Rebuild.
Brought Back is broken if you ever can sack 2 fetch lands the same turn and then bring them both back, because then it's Explosive Vegetation but for 2.
Right. And this deck is going to be running as many fetch lands as it possibly can to pump up your commander.
Yep.
The new Sarah Paragon is really cool in this deck as well.
Oh, yeah.
I love this
That
card.
is pretty
It's
sweet.
so fun. It lets you play one permanent out of your graveyard per turn. It has to be 3 or less, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
3 or less. Yep. So that's just a really resilient black-white graveyard deck that uses creatures to sack and return. We've seen that kind of thing before. There is a much more brutal way to build this.
We've sort of we ran past the part where Carmen says whenever a player sacrifices a permanent, and that means that Carmen will trigger when your opponents sack stuff, which is good because they're going to have fetch lands and treasure as well.
Yeah.
They can curtail that a little bit once they see Carmen, or they'll know that going in. Like they
Sack
see
it before she comes down.
They see Carmen in your command zone, right? Like they're going to play accordingly. But, they don't always have to sack things of their own free will.
Yeah. This is a really, really good Plague Crafter deck.
Yeah.
If you have Carmen on board, you can play a Plague Crafter. You sack the Plague Crafter. They all sack things. That's immediately 4 counters on Carmen. She attacks and brings back the Plague Crafter.
Oh
they
God.
sack 4 things. Because having the Plague Crafter in your graveyard every single turn, it's more counters on Carmen. So she's a huge flying threat. Your opponents can't keep stuff on the board. And there's 100 of these effects. There's Plague Crafter and Fleshbag Marauder, Demon's Disciple. There's tons of these.
Yep.
So your deck could just be that.
And probably not only that, but it has a big contingent of that. Maybe there's 10 edict effects in the deck or more, but 10 that are like sort of stapled to creatures and permanents and things. The cumulative effect of that happening more than a turn or 2 in a row is that you're the only one with a creature.
Right.
Nobody else has creatures. That's just tends to be what happens. Even token decks have trouble keeping up with this because they can't keep the engine part on the board. So it's a tough thing for a lot of decks to deal with. Now, spells decks and some artifact and enchantment based decks are okay because they don't have to sack those things, but yeah,
usually they'll still lose like Archmage Emeritus's and like there are creatures that they want in play. This kind of deck style is not my favorite deck style.
it's not very many people's favorite.
Certainly not my favorite. It's one that I genuinely don't play against. If that's the style that has been established in your deck, I am not interested in playing against it. Because it just sort of elongates the game until you win. And I would rather you just win. So if this is your plan, win right now.
Yeah, I think that's the problem with this style is often people are like, okay, step 1, I'll make everybody sack everything so they don't have anything.
Yeah.
And then they don't have a step 2 because they spend so many resources on step 1.
Right.
And I think, that's the big thing. Because people are not going to like playing against this style. I'm fine with it in general, but I do play more sort of spells decks and things where it, it still is annoying because you're like, well, I can't keep my commander down.
Right.
But there is just a lot of cards that will just end the game. And I think my suggestion would be if you build this style, just don't get super cute with your win cons. Just play Torment of Hailfire, Exsanguinate, Debt to the Deathless. You have Great Merchant down here, which I think is smart as a recursion piece. I had a saying I wrote down here, which is like, you can either be mean or you can be cute. But don't try to be both. Yeah. Because that's where you run into trouble, where you're like, oh, I have this really mean deck. And its win con is really interesting because no. If it's going to be mean, I don't want the win con to be interesting. Just Craterhoof me. No
dirtling and mean. Yeah, please.
just Thassa's Oracle me. Just whatever it is. Great. If it's gonna be mean, just put me out of my misery.
You won the game. Yeah. Brava. Like if your deck is that controlling, have a thing to find that'll close the game. And even if you're like, my plan is Blood Artist. No. No, they're not going to play more creatures, which means you have to generate all the. Do not kill me with 1,000 cuts. I want to be dead. I want to play against a different deck.
You can Blood Artist if you're going to do the reassembling skeleton.
Yeah. If you're gonna loop it into a combo, sure. I've definitely played against this kind of deck before, where they're like, I'll loop Spore Frog forever and make you sack every turn, and you're like, kill me or I'm walking away. Yeah. Like I'm not interested.
I think most playgroups that are around for long enough, they go through like a Grave Pact phase.
I agree.
And then they get out of the Grave Pact phase where like most of the playgroup eventually says, I'm just taking Grave Pact and those Dictative Ereboses out of all of my decks because I've learned it's just, it was novel and fun at first, and then it really gets not that after not too long. Yeah. Okay.
Proactive. Yeah. Proactive game plans.
All right, let's talk about the next commander, which is,
so cool.
This is the one that Jimmy is playing on the Lost Caverns of Ixalan episode of Game Nights.
Yeah. He's
is
also the backup to the Pirate Commander.
Yep.
The Precon.
The Precon, yep. It is Don Andres, the Renegade. I want to say, the Vampire Conquistador helmets. Yeah,
really?
with
They're
the fangs.
They're so cool.
So great.
I love that they're conquistadors.
That's just some really good production design or art direction or whatever. Okay. Don Andres is 1 and Grixis. So 1 a blue, a black, and a red, 4 mana total for a 4/3 legendary vampire pirate. It says each creature you control but don't own gets +2/+2, has menace and death touch, and is a pirate in addition to its other types. And also says whenever you cast a non-creature spell you don't own, create 2 tapped treasure tokens. So Don Andres wants you to take creatures and non-creatures from your opponents. I want you to cast your opponent's non-creature spells and presumably steal their creatures in some way.
Or reanimate them or something like that.
And kind of gives you a different bonus for each one of those things.
Yeah, that's a small distinction for players who haven't played against this kind of the wording before is cards you own are your cards. The cards you brought to the table, cards you control are the ones on your board in front of you. Could be your opponents or anything else. So yeah, you want to be casting your opponent's stuff and you want to be reanimating or threatening or somehow gaining control of their creatures. So this can there's so many cards that do all of these things.
Yeah.
And it can really go in a spider web of directions.
Right.
So we're going to talk about a couple of different options. It's probably best if you're to sort of choose a lane to the one that interests you the most, so you can pick the win con that's appropriate, or, just build the synergy around it.
Right. So casting your opponent's cards, I think, kind of works towards both things, because if you cast their creatures, those are creatures you will control but not own.
Yeah.
But you can cast their non-creatures. And there are a bunch of spells that they don't make the distinction of what kind of spell you're casting. They just say you can cast, you can look at a certain amount of cards or cast cards off your opponent's libraries or whatever. So that category of cards could work towards either piece, I guess, of Don Andres' text.
Yeah. Share the Spoils is one of my favorite cards, and we're going to talk about it a little bit later, I think. It's 1 and a red for an enchantment. It says, when Share the Spoils enters the battlefield or an opponent loses the game, exile the top card of each player's library. During each player's turn, that player may play a land or cast a spell from among cards exiled with Share the Spoils, and they may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast a spell. When they do, exile the top card of their library. So this creates like a little pot in the middle that anybody can play out of once on their turn. And of course, if you cast their non-creature spells, you get 2 treasures for your trouble.
Yep.
Tapped. But there's lots of cards that sort of give you the pick of your opponent's cards.
Yeah, it's cool, though, because you're casting it at a time when you've got mana available, so you're going to do it first. You're going to get the best thing. Yeah. I mean, Stolen Strategy is sort of a recurring kind of semi-version of this, but only for you. So it's an enchantment at the beginning of your upkeep. Exile the top card of each opponent's library until end of turn. You can cast spells from among those, and you may spend mana of any color to cast those spells. So I guess this is more just impulsive draw for your opponent's libraries. But
it just gives you 3 cards that you could cast per turn, though.
Yeah, and then that's going to do that every turn. So yeah, it's obviously good.
It's exactly what this deck wants to do. Along the same lines as Plarg and Nasari, it says at the beginning of your upkeep, each player exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card. An opponent chooses a non-land card exiled this way. You may cast up to 2 spells from among the other cards exiled this way without paying their mana cost. This is also 5 mana. It's 3 red for a 5/4 Orc Efreet. So this one does a similar thing to Stolen Strategy, but you just get to cast the 2 worse ones for free.
Yeah.
And you're guaranteed that they're spells, which is really nice.
Yeah, that's nice because no extra mana needed. So you get kind of free treasures, which are big. It's a lot better to get treasures for nothing than it is to sort of pay mana and get some treasures.
Yeah. Or creatures. I mean, this one doesn't specify what kind of spell it is. But there's lots of cards that let you cast your opponent's cards. We love Gonti, a Lord of Luxury. That's the kind of card that every time I cast it, it overperforms.
It's great.
Xanathar, Guild Kingpin. Actually, Amy the Amazonian played this one as her commander on our...
And what's going off.
Yeah. Yes. Just casting everybody's stuff. If you want a great start for this list, honestly, look at Amy's Xanathar deck. It's really cool. Decadent Dragon, which
Yep.
is cute.
Yeah, it has an adventure that says exile the top 2 cards of target opponent's library face down. You may look at and play those cards for as long as they remain exiled. And then the great thing is you can cast the dragon side and it will make treasures when it attacks. So it also goes to sort of help you paying for the stuff in the treasure theme that you've probably got a sub theme at least. So yeah, there's a ton of stuff that's going to let you cast your opponent's stuff. We wanted to mention some, because there's a category of these that will cast stuff out of your opponent's graveyards.
Right. That's sort of a whole nother thing and requires a whole additional synergy. So like the memory plunders of the world.
Right. Diluvian Primordial we have on here. Halo Forager.
Direfleet Daredevil. All of these come in and cast some, usually they're instants and sorceries. Is that all of these? Yeah. This is more spell focused out of an opponent's graveyard or sometimes out of your graveyard as well.
Yeah, and then you can reanimate out of your opponent's graveyards. You usually you don't always cast those. A lot of times it just puts them on the battlefield. But using your opponent's graveyard, I think, is a thing with this deck that you're going to have to decide how much of it you want to do, because that will sort of inform how much like mass mill you need.
Right.
Because in order for that to work, you need your opponents to have enough cards in their graveyards. Because we've all been in this situation, and that's why I don't play it that much anymore with Diluvian Primordial. And you're like, what do you got in your graveyard? They're like, a Cultivate. What do you got? Nothing. 2 fetch lands. And not enough has happened in the game. And it's like, okay, so my powerful 7 mana card that I can cast right now
does nothing.
Won't do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, that it's because it requires setup. And that setup is you need to have been able to mill the table a little bit. And I don't think you need a ton, but like Mesmeric Orb and a couple of others would probably be enough so that you can make sure when you get these graveyard spells, you can utilize them.
Yeah, I actually really like this strategy over the cards that we were talking about before because it gives you so much more selection. A lot of the time when you're casting your opponent's deck, you're sort of like, I get what I get.
Right.
I hope it's good. But you're not in control of how your opponents build their decks. When you're milling them and using stuff out of their graveyard, you sort of get to pick and choose what your strategy is going to be, find cards that work together, and you get to see what you're casting more often than you do when you're just attacking with an Atali and casting 3 random things. So
you can plan for it. You can strategize a little more,
And I really like the reanimate side of this, where you're reanimating your opponent's creatures with, either a reanimate or a Rise of the Dark Realms, which of course gets all the creatures from your opponent's graveyards.
Yeah, ask Post Malone about that one.
Yeah.
So we wanted to talk about weaponizing treasures as another way that you could go here. You're still going to have to cast non-creature spells that your opponents own in order to sort of get the treasures going. Obviously, you can have other treasure enablers or treasure creators in the deck. But once you're doing that, then if you're leaning in that direction... And notice how we're talking about, well, if you're doing this, you want more of this. And if you're doing that, you want more of that. Don't try and do all these things.
Pick one. That's fun for you.
Pick whichever one seems cool. But if you try and do all of them, you'll do none of them.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mess. This one's tricky. It's a really tough thing to build. It's a really tough thing to balance.
Yeah.
Because, if you're focusing on casting your opponent's non-creature spells with Memory Plunders and Diluvian Primordials, you're going to have more treasures.
Yep.
But if you're focusing on reanimating, then you're going to have more creatures. So your strategy changes each way. But if you're deciding to focus more on non-creatures, then your deck probably wants like the Mirkwood Bats and the Reckless Fireweavers. So when you make those treasures, you're draining the table, you're dealing damage to the table, and you have that extra mana, of course, from the treasures.
Yeah, Disciple of Vault's another one. There's Monumental Corruption.
This card's sweet.
Yeah, it's a sorcery for 3 black. Target player draws X cards and loses X life, where X is the number of artifacts you control. So you can kill people with this too.
You can, depending on how many treasures you have, you can take somebody out right now or just draw 10 cards. Tezzeret, Master of the Bridge. I have a blue-black junk deck that makes a bunch of treasure tokens, and Tezzeret is the MVP. He's got a +2 that says Tezzeret deals X damage to each opponent, where X is the number of artifacts you control. You gain X life. So if you have 10 treasures, you can have a 7 loyalty planeswalker for 6 mana that deals 10 damage, and you gain 10. And it says creatures and planeswalker spells you cast have affinity for artifacts.
So then you
just cost 10 less.
Yeah,
it's really, really powerful. Will close a game very quickly.
Yeah, really cool.
Yeah,
I think. It'll be interesting to see how people build this deck, but. To me, treasure are good on their own, so you don't necessarily need a ton of support for them.
Right.
So, if you're going in one of these other directions, you don't have to necessarily put in a lot to maximize treasure. You can just use the treasure as mana, and that also is pretty good. Yeah. Another way to go is threaten effects.
Yeah.
This is leaning more towards stealing your opponent's creatures, then casting their non-creature spells. You noted here, and I thought it was really shrewd, the payoff for casting non-creature spells, the 2 treasures, is sort of better than the payoff for stealing creatures, which is basically like they get +2/+2 Death Touch and Menace.
Right.
I'd rather have 2 treasures than
a little bit of a bigger 1 creature.
with a little bit of evasion, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, you probably will have to steal some of their creatures as part of your win con at some point, because non-creature spells from your opponents are hard to plan around. Like, how are they going to win the game? Do they have Exsanguinate in their deck?
Hopefully.
You can't guarantee it.
Yeah.
So where does this all add up to? It probably adds up to, outvaluing them, to the point where like you have a board and they don't. And now your stuff is pirates because it's their stuff, and it's big and it's menacey.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a lot of great ways to do this sort of in mass. Obviously, there's like mob rules and insurrections, which threaten everything until end of turn. Now that Anthem is looking really good. Because they don't have any blockers anyway.
I love mob rule.
Mob rule is awesome. It's 6 mana, and you can gain control of the big things or the little things, depending on what's better at the time. Usually the big things, but sometimes there's just more little things.
Yeah. Almost always you find a spot where you can at least kill a player with this card.
Yeah, and it's only 6 mana to Insurrection's what, 10? 8?
8, yeah.
I really like Coercive Recruiter in this deck, because this has Pirate Synergy. It's 4 and a red. Whenever it or another pirate enters the battlefield under your control, gain control of target creature until end of turn, untap that creature until end of turn and gains haste, and becomes a pirate in addition to its other types. So if you reanimate something from your opponent's graveyard, that's a pirate, comes in, and will trigger your Coercive Recruiter, as well as like the Coercive Recruiter ETB.
Yeah, and you probably likely to have a few other pirates. Your commander's a pirate.
Yep.
Yeah. Zara is another one that when it attacks, you look at defending player's hands and you can put a creature card from it onto the battlefield under your control taps and attacking that player. So
Love
it.
Let
me look at your hand. Okay, that one's attacking you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's bigger now.
Yeah, and it returns to their hand at the end of combat. So yeah. But it gets that +2/+2. It gets the menace and everything. So yeah.
One of my favorite cards to reanimate or to cast ever, it is Thieving Amalgam. 5 black for a 6/7 ape snake. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, you manifest the top card of that player's library. So it becomes a face down 2/2. Whenever a creature you control but don't own dies, its owner loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. So there's a little bit of payoff for stealing your stuff. Plus, it gives you a really steady engine of just giving you 2/2s, or in this case, 4/4s with menace and death touch.
That's the thing, is every turn make a 4/4 with menace and death touch. Because this is each opponent's upkeep. So it's brutal.
It is wild.
And you get that payoff of lose 2 life and gain 2 life, even if it's a threatened, affected card, or you stole it in another way, not with the Amalgam. Yeah, that's great. A pet card of mine that I want to talk about is called Chamber of Manipulation. It's
Sweet.
It's 2 blue for an enchant land, and it says enchanted land has tap, discard a card from your hand, gain control of target creature until end of turn. So a couple things to know about this is it's basically a 1 mana, turns anything in your hand into 1 mana, steal their creature until end of turn, but it doesn't give the creature haste. So you have to be a little careful with it. I think this only goes in your deck if you have enough sacrifice outlets, which if you have a lot of threaten effects, get stuff until end of turn, then you're going to want more sacrifice outlets. If you skew more towards like control magics, which is like steal your thing quote unquote permanently.
It's mine now, yeah.
Yeah, you don't need the sacrifice outlets as much. So there's another one where it's like, decide what you're doing, and that will inform sort of the other synergy pieces in the deck. But Chamber of Manipulation, really good if you're up there around 5, 6, 7 different sacrifice outlets.
Yeah.
If you're below that, okay, don't play it.
It's really fun, though. I love this include, and the art's really good.
Old school.
I love all the weird old stuff. Who is this? Wayne England. Of course, if you're doing all the threaten stuff, yes, sack outlets. It turns your threaten effects from like I gain control of it temporarily to I remove it and also gain control of it temporarily.
Yeah, it's like Lava Axe plus removal.
Good. Pretty good.
Yep.
Altar of Dementia, of course, is perfect because you're milling them. You want to reanimate their stuff.
Yep.
We want a good look at their graveyard. So that's my favorite in a deck like this.
I think if you're a threaten effect deck, yeah, Altar of Dementia's got to be one of your favorite cards to see because now all your threatens turn into removal that mills them for the other parts of your deck to work. Yeah.
If anytime I want a sack outlet in the deck, I'm running High Market. I think you probably pick up a Phyrexian Tower for this deck as well. If you want to get a little bit spendier, those are just sack outlets that come on lands. They do not take up slots, and they are so powerful in your deck.
Yeah. And this is the type of deck that is not going to be like Carmen. You're not trying to sack, 7, 10 things in a turn. You really, if you can sack 1 or 2, you're good. So on the lands is pretty good.
Yeah.
All right. That's a cool card.
I like that deck. It's neat.
All right, this next one's a bit of a doozy.
Oh my gosh. People are so hyped on this one. It is Ojer Axonil. Ojer Axonil, Deepest Might. 2 red for a legendary creature god. He's a 4/4 with trample. If a red source you control would deal an amount of non-combat damage less than Ojer Axonil's power to an opponent, that source deals damage equal to his power instead. When he dies, return it to the battlefield tapped and transformed under its owner's control. So this is the temple land that we mentioned before. He turns into Temple of Power. It taps to add red, and then 2 and a red, tap, transform Temple of Power, activate only if red sources you control dealt 4 damage or more non-combat damage this turn, and only as a sorcery.
We should mention, too, that the Temple of Power enters the battlefield tapped.
Yes. So there's a lot to take in on this card. It makes all of your non-combat damage sources equal to their power. Immediately, that's great.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, you're looking at, okay, how do I deal non-combat damage equal to 1? Because that's going to be the cheapest.
Right.
Because that becomes 4.
Yeah.
So it's 4 times as good as it would be. Even 2 is still fine. It's twice as good as it normally would be. But and obviously, we'll talk about this in a minute, but you can also increase Ojer Axonil's power to make it even more. Like if you put a sword of whatever and whatever, then all of a sudden your 1 non-combat damage is dealing, 6, 7, 8, 9. Like you can get it up there, obviously.
Yeah, you're in red. You can make stuff big.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different directions you can go in this deck. The first one I wanted to mention is a little bit punishier.
I love this card.
This is a Torbrand classic, which a lot of these are going to be. It's Mana Barbs, 3 and a red. Whenever a player taps a land for mana, Mana Barbs deals 1 damage to that player.
This card is better than you think, and the great thing about Ojer Axonil is that it says opponent.
Yeah.
So your lands tap and deal 1 damage to you.
Your opponent's lands tap and deal 4.
I mean,
twice an Ancient Tomb to them.
I mean, it really is a thing where they go, oh, okay, so if I don't kill either the commander or Mana Barbs, I only have 7 mana I can use the rest of this game from lands. They can still tap mana rocks and stuff, obviously. But it is a way that if you're ahead, you can often be like, you can't come back because you'll die.
Yeah, if you start using those lands. Yeah, Mana Barbs definitely closes the door on this game, is the idea. There's other punishy effects like that. Rampaging Ferocidon says players can't gain life.
Take a damage.
Huge. It also says whenever another creature enters the battlefield, Rampaging Ferocidon deals 1 damage to that creature's controller. So for every creature, it's another 4, another 4, another 4.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Really, really dangerous. I did want to mention Valakut is one of the first things that you think about for this deck. You're like, it's red, it's damage, it's awesome. Valakut is a land. It is not a red source. It is a colorless source. Ooh. And I know you look at it and you're like, that card's red.
Feels like it should be red.
Look how red it is. That's red. Lands are colorless. So you cannot increase the amount of damage done by a Valakut.
Doesn't mean don't put it in there.
Doesn't mean don't put it in there. You're playing mono red, you're dealing damage. It's awesome. But just want to clear that up. So yeah, that version is a lot more permanent based. It's a lot more of stuff that's like you can't do this unless you pay a cost.
Yeah. There's also a version that's probably going to be sort of tokeny, create maybe a bunch of goblin tokens and things like that, have a lot of creatures entering the battlefield doing a little bit of attacking, but adding some non-combat to those attacks. And that maybe plays Impact Tremors, which we mentioned earlier, Perforos. I mean, Impact Tremors, that becomes 4 damage every time you have a creature into the battlefield.
Yeah, that's like 10 creatures have to enter. What?
Yeah, that's pretty nuts. If you just play like Dragon Fodder or something like that, like that's already 8 damage. Yeah. And then Perforos, well, becomes the same as Impact Tremors, honestly, there. Yeah, but still good. But there's also stuff like Hellrider, which when your creatures attack, Hellrider deals 1 damage to the player that's being attacked. And this is non-combat, that 1 damage. So
it's for every creature attacking, it's 4 damage on top of the combat damage.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of cards that kind of do similar things to that. And this is all taking advantage of the fact that, like, okay, I am going to still get creatures out. I'm just going to kind of go wide. And I'm going to have all this incidental synergy damage just be quadrupled.
I want to mention this one because it's awesome. It's Flame Fusillade. It's 3 in a red for a sorcery. It says, until end of turn, permanents you control gain tap. This permanent deals 1 damage to target creature or player. So now every permanent you control represents 4 damage to your opponents.
Including your lands.
Including your lands, your treasures, your tokens. All of them are pingers that deal 4. And that's, if you haven't buffed Ojer.
Yeah. It's easy to think of scenarios where near the end of the game, that's a kill everyone, right?
Yeah,
Because everyone's
absolutely.
below 10 and you're just like tap 2 to kill you, 3 to kill you, and 2 to kill you. Yeah. Very cool. There's other strategies like Storm.
Yep.
So Storm is very good at sort of tacking damage onto when you cast spells. That's kind of that's their synergy pieces, I guess.
Yeah, Keswick Flame Breathers, Firebrand Archers, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So now it's 4 damage to each opponent. Anytime you cast, a lot of the time in this deck, it's like 1 mana instants and sorceries that draw a card.
Yep.
And you just chain them together, and it's very, very quick, especially if you have 1 or 2 of these pieces on board. Thermo Alchemist does a similar thing, but untaps, and you do it again every time you cast an instant or sorcery.
Yep. Yeah, those are going to be great. You're going to play that classic kind of gutter snipe style stuff.
Yeah.
And you're going to look for a moment to do some sort of a ritual, get a bunch of mana in the pool, deploy 1 or 2 of these, and then just chain off, 7, 8 spells and end the game. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you get to Grape Shot for like 5 even,
Oh my
you get
gosh,
to deal 20 damage with a Grape Shot. Grape Shot deals 1 damage but has Storm. So if you've cast a couple of spells beforehand, like your Commander or a Mana Geyser at this.
5 is very modest.
Yeah, 5's nothing.
I've seen grape shots for 25.
Right?
So
Yeah.
that's kill everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, Grape Shot is wild in a deck like this. I did want to mention Fiery Confluence is really neat with damage modifiers.
Oh, yeah, this is interesting.
So the way it reads is 2 red. For a sorcery, choose 3. You may choose the same mode more than once. The first mode is Fiery Confluence, deals 1 damage to each creature. Second mode is deals 2 damage to each opponent. Third mode is destroy target artifact. Because of the way that Fiery Confluence works, if you choose the deal 2 damage to each opponent 3 times, it will deal 4 and then 4 and then 4 again. Because it is individual instances of dealing damage. So your commander will modify that every single time. So if you have just Ojer Axonil and Fiery Confluence, you will do 12 damage.
To everybody.
Just those.
So you'll actually do 36
36
table.
damage.
Holy
yeah.
crap. It's
Just
pretty
2
good.
cards.
Pretty good.
9 mana, but
There's also cards that go in wheel decks that do sort of pinging damage like this. Glinthorn Buccaneer, Braylon, Sky Shark Rider. Whenever you discard a card, they deal 1 damage to each opponent. So that's obviously like you have this out, you wheel. You're probably going to want wheels in the deck anyway. You do. If you've got 7 cards in hand, then you're going to deal 28 damage to everybody. Yeah. A lot of times you wheel, you don't have 7 cards in hand, but maybe you got 4. It's still 16.
Still
it's a lot.
Pretty good. Of course, the big red elephant in the room is Pyrohemia.
We wouldn't know anything about that.
No.
Wouldn't know anything about Pyrohemia.
Not dying to Pyrohemia.
Never seen it before
with
on
the
the
damage
battlefield.
modifier.
Yep. That's never happened to me recently.
On stage.
Yeah, in front of 1,000 people.
Pyrohemia is an enchantment for 2 red. It says at the beginning of the end step, if no creatures are on the battlefield, sacrifice it. But most importantly, red Pyrohemia deals 1 damage to each creature and each player.
Yeah, I don't think we went over this, but Ojer Axonil doesn't affect damage to creatures at all. It's only doing the extra damage to players and to your opponents.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this goes really well with Pyrohemia because normally the damage modifiers you add to Pyrohemia make it so that all the creatures die and then it goes away.
Right.
But this is like, oh, well, I can do at least 3 for 3 red.
Without killing your commander.
My commander will live through it. I'll only take 3. My opponents will take 12. And then, and the great thing is you can activate it on your opponent's turn. So it doesn't matter that much. You go, cool, go to your turn. Now the damage wears off and I can do 3 more. And now it's been 24 and people are probably dead.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the fact that it doesn't add it to the creatures really helps out here.
Yeah, Pyrohemia is wild in this deck, but if you really want to have a big turn, where you Mana Geyser or Jessica's Confluence, Jessica's Will, got stuck on Fiery Confluence, there's a really neat way to give your commander indestructible that you brought up.
Yeah, so Ojer Axonil is a god, and Tyrite Sanctum is a card that we've talked about before, but you can skip right to the last mode on it because Ojer Axonil is a god, and you don't have to make it a god first, which usually is like another hurdle you have to go through to use this card. It says pay 4, sack the Tyrite Sanctum. It's a land, by the way. Put an indestructible counter on target god. So it's not hard to think of games where you just go play your commander,
Hold up Tyrite Sanctum.
Hold up Tyrite Sanctum. Oh, you say commander's out. You play Tyrite Sanctum.
Yeah.
And you say go, and they're like, crap, because if I go to remove it, then he puts the indestructible counter on it. So, they maybe don't do it. You get to the end step before your turn. You put the counter on it. You untap and you go Mana Geyser, Jessica's Will, Pyrohemia. It's over because you don't have to wait the extra turns now. Because of the indestructible, the creature's not going to die. Also, if you can do it all in one turn, Pyrohemia goes away at the end step.
Yeah.
So I guess that part doesn't matter as much. But
yeah. It's at the beginning of the end step if you wipe the whole
Pestilence.
board. Yeah, you could also do it on the stack. Like if you have all of the mana to do it. Let's say you Mana Geyser for 25. You can cast your commander, you could cast Pyrohemia, you could red.
Oh, I guess once it's dead, if you didn't have indestructible, then those are only dealing one.
That's true.
So you do need the indestructible.
You do need the indestructible to make sure that it is modified all the way through. That is fair.
Yeah. So
indestructible good. Who knew? I wanted to talk about the backside a little bit because it does give you a qualification for how you flip it over. So let's say somebody does have a removal spell. You don't have the Tyrite Sanctum. Your Ojer Axonil dies, it goes to the graveyard, comes back, transformed as the land, tapped. Then you untap it, and you have to have some way to deal 4 or more non-combat damage this turn with a red source.
So it has to be your turn because it says only as a sorcery.
Only as a sorcery. So you need to be able to do 4 non-combat damage. It could be to you, as long as it's damage. It could be to any of your opponents, but as long as it has to be a red source and it has to be on your turn, and then you activate Temple of Power and Ojer's back. So I wanted to...
So the deck needs some ways to be able to reliably sort of deal 4 damage at a time, because otherwise you'll just get stuck on that land side.
Yeah, I mean, you could send it to the command zone if you don't have a way to flip it back over, but that's such a waste of value if you have to send it to the command zone and then recast it for 7.
Or 7?
Yeah, it's 5, I think, to cast.
I think it's 6. I thought it was 6, but no, you're right. It's the...
it's 4. Gosh, it's 6 to cast. Oh no.
4 mana.
I was thinking it was 5. And you thought it was 6?
I thought it was 6. I think I was getting mixed up with the token tripler.
The token tripler, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well. 4 mana. It's better than I thought.
But if you want to flip it over and not pay the 6 mana, you run stuff like Spear Spewer that just taps and deals 1 damage to each player. That includes you. And then you can flip it right over.
Okay, yeah, that's easier than I thought. I was thinking 4 damage to a player, but
nope.
if 1 to each player would be 4 damage total. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so if you have it,
that means Impact Tremors kind of works too. Or
it gets you to 3.
Right.
So as long as you have 2 creatures that can enter the battlefield, you can flip it back over.
All right, yeah.
It does transform, and you've tapped the land to activate it, so it does transform back tapped. So it, like, anytime it transforms, it's gonna be tapped for one reason or another.
And you don't care too much if the creature is tapped or not.
Yeah. But just for knowing.
But you do care about the fact that it still costs mana to transform it from the land side. So whatever you do to deal the 4 damage, you need the mana left over that same turn
to be able to go.
And that's why, something like Spear Spewer or already having a Perforos out is going to be a lot preferable.
Yeah, rather than like casting a spell to then have to spend the mana to activate the land to flip it back over.
Yeah, like if you fireball somebody for 4, like how do you still have the mana left to transform it after that?
It's tough.
And if you do that, then we're pretty late game and you spent your whole turn during that and your opponent's going to win now.
Yeah, pingers are really strong in this deck anyway. I think making sure that you have ways to that are on board that'll do the 4 damage that you need without
interesting.
Sulfuric Vortex even.
Yeah, it makes me think that you actually want the ones that deal to all players a little bit more than the ones that only hit opponents just for that exact scenario. That's interesting. I wouldn't have thought of that. Okay, that's cool.
A note on this commander. So normally when you're building a deck like this, a punishy deck like a Torbran or Obosh. Yeah, I was trying to think of the red one that has the axe on the back. Anyway, just big damage decks. You're also going to run Torbran. You're also going to run Fire Emancipation. You're also going to run City on Fire and all the damage doublers you possibly can.
Right.
Ojer Axonil doesn't pair particularly well with other damage replacement effects.
Right. We were talking about this. It's interesting because it sets it to a specific number. Yeah. It doesn't times it by 4.
Right.
It says deal this amount based on my power. And so however you sort of stack the replacement effects, that number always kind of
It is always going to be one of the effects applied. There's no way to have both of them applied. Because of the way that replacement effects work, which I learned and we talked about in the You're Reading Cards. You're Reading Magic Cards Wrong episode. When you are affected by two replacement effects, you're the one who chooses, not the one that controls the two replacement effects. When you're the affected player. So if they deal 2 damage to you and have an Ojer and a Torbran on the battlefield, they get to choose which one modifies it. Let's say your Ojer is your Axonil is like a 5/5, just so it's different. They could either choose Torbran, like makes it 4, and then it's replaced by the Axonil, which would make it 5, or they go the other way and replace it with the Axonil, which is 5, and then add to the Torbran, which would be 7. So they would just do it the way that's less. And in that case,
they get to choose.
Yeah,
if you got to choose, you would obviously choose 7, but they're like, oh, well, I'll just do the 5.
I'll just choose 5.
Yeah.
Because like I can replace it in a way that one of them isn't working. Yeah. If you choose the 5 in that scenario, Torbran hasn't helped you in any way.
You may as well not play the card,
Right. And
it's the same with like Fire Emancipation.
Right.
If you have a thing that deals 2, that would deal 6. But Ojer Axonil would turn it to 5, so they'll just stack it so they take the 5. Or they'll have to do 6 then in either
They'll
case.
have to do 6. So they always do, like, it's the bigger one has to be
but
the
never
one,
both
but never both.
Combined.
Because they will choose the way that it's replaced.
Got it.
So obviously, if you got to choose how the thing, they would be excellent together.
But you don't.
But you do not. It is worth noting that, like, the 2 damage, once it's turned into 6 with the tripler, Axonil doesn't see that and say, actually, it's 5. He sees that and says,
it's above my power.
It's above my power. There's nothing. This has nothing to do with me. And
if he sees it as 2, it turns it to 5. Fire Emancipation would turn it to 15, and your opponent goes, well, I'm not going to choose that path.
There's no way I'm doing that. So it's interesting because this kind of deck does want these effects. You want damage modifiers, but you don't want as many as you normally would, and maybe you don't want the ones that are 8 mana, 6 mana, 5 mana.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is actually probably a blessing to most deck builders.
Yeah.
Because they won't put a card that's kind of, I hate to say it, bad, like Fire Emancipation in their deck. Like, those cards are fun. They read really fun. They never do anything. And that's the problem. It's 6 mana, nothing happens. And you're just hoping to, oh boy, I really hope that I'll untap with this and I'll do this crazy thing. And all 3 of your opponents see it and go, well, we got to kill that person.
Yeah. I mean, if you slam it and you can attack right away, great. But this is non-combat damage. You have to do stuff in order for it to work. They're not super, super good in this deck. So maybe you include a Torbran just in case you don't have access to your commander, but don't go crazy.
Yep. Okay, let's talk about the last piece of this puzzle here, which is increasing the power of Ojer Axonil so that it will not deal 4 damage from your non-combat. It'll deal a lot more.
7, 8, 10. It gets wild. Like every time that you increase his power, you multiply it by that. You know, like now it's, if he's a 4/4, it's 4 times. If it's 5/5, it's 5 times the damage. Like it just gets...
It decreases the amount of times you have to deal damage to kill your opponents, right? Like once Ojer Axonil is at 8 power, you only need 5 instances of 1 damage to kill a player who's at full life total.
Right.
So that's a big difference from the 10 times you have to do it if it stays at 4 power. So increasing the power is a force multiplier for your Thermo Alchemists and things like that. Because if you're going to storm off, it's much better to be like, I only have to storm off and cast 4 spells.
Right. That's nothing.
That's
barely
easy.
a storm. That is a drizzle.
So there's probably some amount of like equipment you want to put in the deck.
I really like Hero's Blade in this kind of deck because this is 2-mana equipment that goes on the battlefield. When Ojer Axonil enters the battlefield, the Hero's Blade equips automatically and makes him a 7/6.
Yeah.
That's like, you can throw that away on any turn. You spend 2 mana on that.
And now it's only 6 instances of 1 point of damage to, knock everybody out. And that's if they're at 40, right?
Yeah. That's if they've taken no damage, which if your deck is working, they've taken some damage.
Yeah. There's Bone Splitter, which is very cost effective. There's Umezawa Jite, which we talked about on our drafting equipment episode. And that allows you to sort of choose the turn when you're going to make Ojer like extra big because you remove counters to give +2/+2. So you just save up a few till the turn you're going to do it, which is exciting. And I like that because unless they remove the Jite, it can just sort of sit off on the side and then get equipped. Even if the commander gets killed, well, still sitting there with the counters on it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, there's even faster ways to buff power. Unleash Fury just doubles the power of target creature. And this is a 2-mana instant. So,
in a lot of ways, the instants are better because your opponents won't have calculated in. So if you've got a Hero's Blade out, they're like doing the math.
Right. But like, we got to answer this Hero's Blade.
But if you have an instant in your hand that's going to buff the power, they're not calculating for that. So they're thinking you're here when you're really here. And that's kind of how you sneak in wins when people aren't expecting it.
Yeah, I mean, the way I see this playing out is you have like a couple of pingers on the battlefield, maybe. Like you have a Thermo Alchemist and the Firebrand Archer or something on the battlefield. Then you cast a Mana Geyser, or you get like a huge amount of mana, cast your commander, and then they're like, oh no, we have to remove that right now. But you're like, too late, Unleash Fury, double his power, instant.
Yeah, they're like Path to Exile, and you're like, cool. Yeah. In response to that, Unleash Fury.
Yeah.
Let that resolve. Your path is still on the stack. With that on the stack.
Boop.
Yeah.
Boop,
and they're like, crap, I tried to remove it. I was ready.
Yeah, I was ready for you. But you're like, if you have 3 instants on the battlefield at that point, what do we say? You only have to deal 5 damage. So you would only have to...
We have to deal 1 damage 5 times.
Yeah, 1 damage 5...
Or 2 damage 5 times or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, 1 damage 5 times, but you have 2 pingers. Like, the game's over.
Yeah.
All of this is going to move at instant speed. Your opponents... You have to be ready for your opponents to be ready for you. Because it is all on the face. It's in your command zone. Your opponents go, uh-oh, we have to be ready for that.
Yeah, it'll play a lot like a Storm deck, I think. No, even if you're not playing the quote-unquote Storm version, even if you're doing the creature token version, it's still going to play like that, where you sort of set up for this big turn where their calculations have been off. Because they can see your commander in your command zone, so they have a general idea of what's going to happen, but you're trying to pick that moment when you have Deflecting Swat and Mana Geyser, and they thought, like, okay, we're going to take some damage here, but it's not going to be lethal. So, and you're like, you didn't know I had this.
Yeah. Running as many of these power doublers is awesome. Unleash Fury, Rush of Blood, Fatal Frenzy. Fatal Frenzy is like Berserk, where you sacrifice it at end of turn, and it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter if everybody else is dead.
Damage is done, you know? So I think running all of those makes this deck really, really nimble and super scary.
All right. We are about a third of the way through. We have 8 more commanders. 8? Is that true? I think so, to talk about. But before we get into the next round, we are going to take a quick break and hear a message from our sponsors. We'll be right back.
Late night at the command zone. Josh searches tirelessly for new employees.
Okay, I got to read resumes, check all the job sites. This is going to take hours. I know. I'll find someone to do the hiring for me. Wait, but how do I hire them? This is indeed a conundrum. That's it! Indeed! The platform where I can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Their powerful hiring platform has tools that can help me find qualified candidates fast. I'll be shown resumes that meet my requirements immediately after I sponsor a post. Then, people I invite directly are 3 times more likely to apply than if they had just seen us in a search. Yes! I can finally join more than 3 million businesses worldwide using Indeed to hire great talent! I am a genius!
Is Josh okay?
Oh yeah, he does this all the time.
Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/CommandZone. Offer good for a limited time. Claim your $75 credit now at Indeed.com/CommandZone. Just go to Indeed.com/CommandZone and support the show by saying you heard about it on this podcast. Indeed.com/CommandZone. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. All right, I'm ready to record. Let's do this. Go, go, go.
Whoa, what's the rush?
No, I got to make sure I have time for Black Friday shopping.
Josh, you were fine. That is weeks away.
No, not with RAYCON's early Black Friday sale. To get everyone in the holiday shopping spirit a bit early, RAYCON is offering 20% off everything on their site, with select products up to 50% off. I use my RAYCON earbuds all the time, and I always say they make great gifts for any music or podcast lover with their 32-hour battery life and perfect in-ear fit. But now RAYCON is taking their reputation for high quality and low prices and expanding it with RAYCON Home and RAYCON PowerTech. Their 5-star reviewed Magic 180 cable can charge iOS, micro USB, and Type-C devices 8 times faster with 100-watt power delivery.
And done. Holiday gifts acquired.
Wait, that fast?
Yeah, recording can wait. You got to get those deals. Come on, Josh, go, go, go.
I'm going.
Wait, I meant on your phone. Hurry now to buyraycon.com/command to get 20 to 50% off site-wide.
That's buyraycon.com/command to score up to 50% off RAYCON products. Again, buyraycon.com/command.
Welcome back, everybody. We are talking about the most powerful commanders in Lost Caverns of Ixalan. Let's get back to it, starting with a Selesnya Kitty. It's Sovereign Okinec Ahau. 2 green, white for a 3/4 cat noble. It's legendary with ward 2. Whenever the Sovereign attacks for each creature you control with power greater than that creature's base power, put a number of +1/+1 counters on that creature equal to the difference.
It's word soup.
You're like, with power greater than its power? What?
It reads more complicated than it is, but it definitely sounds weird. So what the Sovereign cares about is the creatures you control that have been buffed in some way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if they've got an equipment on them, there's an anthem out, they've had some +1/+1 counters. If they are originally a 2/2 in their bottom right corner, but for any other reason, they're a 4/4 right now, then Sovereign says, okay, cool, what's the difference? And they're like, well, I was a 2/2, but not right now, I'm a 4/4. Cool, I'm going to give you +2/+2, 1/1, plus 2 1/1 counters.
Yeah.
So now you're a 6/6.
Nice. Next time you attack with the Okinec Ahau, it's gets 4 more counters. So it's
now
10,
you're 10/10. Yeah.
Ah!
Yeah. It definitely sort of grows exponentially, but that is sort of I sort of think of it sort of as modified.
Yeah.
Not all modifications do buff creatures, but just clocking which ones are modified kind of gets you in the realm of like, okay, what am I supposed to be looking for here?
Yeah, so this deck is just going to be full of ways to modify your creature's power. And you can do that in a couple of different ways. Again, if you pick one, pick that one and build around it. So the first option for this deck is equipment. Like a Bone Splitter that we mentioned before is a very basic, very cheap way to buff power. Blackblade Reforged, it gives a creature +1/+1 for each land you control. That's a huge difference between base power and
he's going to get 5 or 6 or 7 1/1 counters, right?
just every turn. Then you move the Blackblade to another creature, make that one bigger. So that's like an equipment-focused version of this.
I like the Bone Splitter because it generally is a lot cheaper to find equipment that buff power but not toughness.
Yeah.
But the Sovereign will actually give 1/1 counters, which do give it toughness. So, I guess I kind of misspoke. If the 2/2 in my example was actually a 4/2, then it would now become a 6/4.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it gets some toughness too from Sovereign. So, yeah, that's actually an efficient way to go about it, I think. Add only power.
Yeah.
Because usually at a lower sort of...
Equip costs.
Yeah, or mana value
And mana
cost
values.
point, yeah.
Yeah. If you want to go in a more +1/+1 counter direction, which of course you can, Selesnya is great at it, and obviously your commander cares about counters. I really liked Clamavus. I don't know this one. It's from 40k.
Yep.
It's 4 and a green for a human Tyrannid Artificer. It's a 3/3. It says each creature you control gets +1/+1 for each +1/+1
boy.
counter on it. Do that math, Josh Lee.
Okay, so it's a 2/2 with 2 +1/+1 counters on
Yeah,
it.
so it's getting +2/+2.
So it's
from
actually a
Clamavus.
6/6.
Yeah.
And then Sovereign puts
4.
4 more counters on it, which gives it 8. So it's a 14/14.
I think so.
I believe. I don't know.
And that's based. That was a 2/2 with 2
This is for
counters on
people.
it.
Yeah, this is for people who like math. Yeah, and Selesnya +1/+1 counters is a theme that has been around for a long time, so we don't need to go over every card that does that, but the hardened scales and, what did we say earlier? That was the card that we would say if there was +1/+1 counters every time? The Oscillate.
The Oscillate.
The Oscillate,
Yeah.
yeah. Don't forget to play that one.
Virtue of White that we mentioned before.
Virtue of
Strength. Loyalty.
Yep. There's also, I think, an Anthem effect version of this deck where you're putting out cards that say all your creatures get +2/+2 or whatever, because, and that's a more of probably a go wide strategy,
Right.
where you're making tokens or something, and Sovereign is saying, okay, cool, you've got a bunch of 1/1s that are actually 3/3s because of some Anthem that's out, and I'm going to give all of those 2 1/1 counters. And, now they're all 5/5s. So Marshall's Anthem is a example of this.
Yeah. Marshall's Anthem is awesome.
Also, yeah.
Because it's also a reanimation spell.
Yep.
So it's creatures you control get +1/+1. And then it has multi-kicker, 1 and a white. So it's 2 white, and every time you kick it, it's an additional 1 and a white. And you reanimate a creature to the battlefield for each time you have multi-kicked it. So if you use this to reanimate an Avenger of Zendikar, you make it out of things, all of those above.
Crack your
play
fetch
a
land. Yeah.
You get the cook. How many
pretty
counters now?
It's pretty good. It's pretty good. There's also Unnatural Growth, which is not your traditional Anthem effect, but still kind of is. It's 1 green, 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 green. So 1 and 4 green, 5 mana for an enchantment. At the beginning of each combat, double the power and toughness of each creature you control until end of turn.
Ah!
Yeah.
That gets out of hand so fast.
Yeah, so then they'll be sort of 3 times their power by the time that's over, unless they were already enhanced in some other way. So, yeah, pretty crazy.
Yeah, and then, of course, there's just overruns. You're in green. You want to play your Overwhelming Stampedes. This is wild with a Crater Hoof. Of course, they're dead, but now they're double dead. But
Double dead.
Even just traditional overrun, which is +3/+3 in trample, is now +6/+6 in trample, and that's with no modifications other than that. So there's a lot of different ways to buff all of your creatures by modifying them.
Yep.
But in this deck, I kind of like creatures that modify themselves.
Interesting.
So something like a Walking Ballista is
God.
base 0/0. Right. So
if it's a 3/3 right now, it's going to get 3 counters.
It's going to get 3 counters whenever you attack. And you don't have to attack with the Walking Ballista.
Right.
Just
the Sovereign.
Just the Sovereign.
Oh my gosh.
So Walking Ballista becomes an exponentially bigger problem every single time you run a lot of +1/+1 counter synergy in this deck. And now you're out of control entirely.
Yeah, because you just keep reloading it.
Yeah.
And then you just fire it off, kill everything you feel like, and then reload it.
Yeah.
Brutal. There's Fabro Elder, which gets +1/+1 for each color among permanents you control, but is a base 0/0, and then taps for each color permanent you control. But this is a way for it to stop being a bloom tender at some point and start becoming a bloom killer beater. There it is.
Bloom, bender.
Bloom beater is good.
I liked Multani Yavimaya Avatar, which is sort of a Blackblade Reforged just on a creature. It's base 0/0, but gets +1/+1 for each land you control and each land in your graveyard. It is also Reach and Trample, notably.
Pretty good.
This is a Phantom Neshoba deck.
Yeah. Sure.
Josh.
Yes, okay.
Bring back Phantom Neshoba.
Yep. Don't call it a comeback. That's 5 green and blue for a 0/0 cat beast spirit with trample. It enters the battlefield with 7 1/1 counters on it. And then whenever it deals damage, you gain that much life. But it says, if damage would be dealt to the Phantom Neshoba, prevent that damage, remove a 1/1 counter from it.
How do you even beat that?
It's unbeatable. It's unbeatable. Because it's gonna have 14 counters on it by the time you get going at the least.
And then it has trample and basically lifelink.
Yeah.
I love Phantom Neshoba, but any card like this that you can really utilize those counters and you're trying to reload, like a Mindless Automaton seems really good. You can remove counters and draw cards and get more counters on it.
Yeah, that's, of course, more the way I thought about it because, I'm always trying to think of like, okay, well, how do I turn these 1/1 counters and this power into some other resource? And I think we put down Crystalline Crawler, which is probably one of the best cards in the deck.
Yeah.
Because it enters the battlefield with 1/1 counters equal to the number of colors of mana you spent to cast it. But then you can remove a counter at no cost and create a mana of any color. And then you can also tap it to put a 1/1 counter on it. It's got base power and toughness 1/1. So if you're in a 2-color deck, it's going to come in as a 3/3. And then you're going to attack with Sovereign, and it's a 5/5, but there's 4 +1/+1 counters. So instead of creating power, your Sovereign created mana.
Yeah. Now you're even on mana, and that's after 1 turn.
Yeah, and that could be a thing where with +1/+1 counter synergies or even equipment or something, you just throw it onto the Crystalline Crawler real quick, attack, and have a turn where you're like, it's pretty early in the game, but I have 12 counters on this thing, which represent 12 mana. And those are the type of turns where you just kind of go off.
Yeah. Kami of Whispered Hopes is a new one this year that is a hardened scale. So every time a counter goes on, an additional counter goes on, and it taps for mana equal to its power. Yep. Yes. So it's really great when you can modify the power, but it's also really good with the counter synergy in the deck, of course.
Yeah, you got to get something on it. First of all, it's not like these other cards where it naturally modifies itself. But once you've done that first step, then it's going to very quickly grow out of control to the point where it's tapping for 12 mana or so.
Yeah.
I think Heronblade Elite is another card that could fall into that category. So, yeah. Those are the ways to kind of turn your advantage into longer term advantage than like I have to attack right now with these creatures that are big.
Yeah, this deck snowballs.
Yeah.
So the more resources that you can make, the faster, the bigger the snowball gets, the faster the snowball rolls.
Yeah.
I think 2 turns, this deck is out of control. Like basically if they have the 1 big turn, then next turn, the game is over.
And people are going to see that and they're going to be ready for it. They're going to be ready to kill your commander before that big attack. Like they're not fools. And so you know, a lot of it is about sequencing and making sure your setup's right and you have protection in place before trying to go for it. Yeah.
there's a lot of great Selesnya counters cards. I really wanted to mention Hamza, Guardian of Audition. He's an elephant warrior for 4 green and a white. He's a 5/5. Spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature you control with a counter on it. So it's really great in the go wide strategies. But creatures use spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it. So now, again, your counters are mana. You have a big elephant. You're doing really good.
Yeah, you're doing really good.
You're doing it, you guys.
Yeah, and all the usual suspects to add the counters that we talked about earlier will work. The Felidar retreats and stuff.
Yeah.
Stuff like Kodama is going to be really good because you're going to have all modified creatures because Sovereign's going to make them that way on attack.
Yeah,
So-
and they get trample from Kodama plus the land on damage.
Yeah, and I think a couple of the Outlast Lords are probably good because they will give you like, I don't know, I like Abzan Battle Priest as it gives everything lifelink that has a 1/1 counter on it. So you go to combat and you attack, Sovereign triggers, puts the counters on, and now the Abzan Battle Priest is sort of online and all that stuff got lifelink. Or flying from the Falconers is probably even better, right?
That's a win con.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's the kind of thing you hold it in your hand until the turn you're going to do the attack because they think they can block some of it.
Nope.
No, you can't. Yeah.
You cannot. You're not ready. This deck's sweet, super, super fast, explosive. It feels very green, but it has the stability of white, which is nice.
Yeah. Play your protection spells.
Yes.
Play some card draw. People are going to board wipe you, and you're going to have to build that deck in a way that it can recover. Yeah. All right, this next one is really weird.
It's so weird. We had to talk about it because I didn't know what it did.
It looks weird. It reads weird. I'm not sure if it's cool or just plain weird. It is Tetzin Gnome Champion. The artwork's sweet. I don't know exactly what it is, but it looks cool. It is a blue, a red, and a white for a 2/2 legendary artifact creature gnome. Whenever Tetzin or another double-faced artifact enters the battlefield under your control, mill 3 cards. You may put an artifact card from among them into your hand. So maybe draws you a card. Probably a pretty good hit, right, on an artifact deck. But it has one of the new mechanics from Lost Caverns, which is craft with 6 artifacts.
That's a lot.
And 4 generic mana. So this means you pay for it, you exile Tetzin, and you exile 6 artifacts from among permanents you control and or cards from your graveyard.
Right.
So it can count the artifacts in your graveyard. They can be tokens, so it could be treasures and things like that. And then you return this card transformed under its owner's control. Craft only as a sorcery, which is important.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you jump through all those hoops, and you do all that,
We've did the double back handspring through the fiery hoop.
yeah, it's pretty crazy. You'd think you're going to get something amazing. So here's what you get. It turns into the Golden Gear Colossus, which is a 6/6 legendary for creature gnome. So you get +4/+4 from the other side. Has vigilance and trample.
Okay.
And it says, whenever the Golden Gear Colossus enters the battlefield or attacks, transform up to one other target double-faced artifact you control and create 2 1/1 colorless gnome artifact creature tokens.
Okay. Better be a good double-sided artifact. Yeah, that was just reading the card that you just did. You just read it out loud.
5 minutes of everybody's lives that they're never going to get back. I got confused while reading it twice.
Yeah, I was like, we got to talk about this, but it took me ages to just sit down and be like, all right, what do you do?
Wait. I mean, before we did this, I don't think I could name like 4 double-faced artifacts that transform.
Yeah, like Dowsing Dagger, Treasure Map,
Primal Amulet, Azor's Gateway. Those are
that's 4.
Those are the 4 I would have known.
Incubator tokens. I got one. That's a good one.
Oh,
you
man.
exile 4 artifacts.
It's totally worth it if you
it.
flip an incubator token off this. I mean, it's something. It feels like most of the time you're not going to get the value of transforming something. There just won't be enough.
Yeah, you really... Okay, so there's a lot to think about with this commander. You want a super high density of artifacts because you really want this mill 3 to
draw you a card.
Draw you a card.
Yep.
And to just get a lot of artifacts in your graveyard.
That's true. Your best case scenario is 3 artifacts go in there. So you pick one and put it in your hand. The other 2 stay there for the
craft later.
Land. Okay.
Yeah.
So you want lands.
Yeah.
You need your lands to be artifacts.
I mean, I think you want the full set of like the artifact land, like Seed of the Synod, the
Every
white one,
one
and the
you
red
can
one.
get.
All of those. You want all of the indestructible duels that come in tapped. And then you want cheap artifacts that make a lot of other artifacts. So you can just exile like tokens and stuff.
Yeah, you really like it to be clues and treasure and food.
Right. You really don't want to be exiling real things that you're using.
That are in play.
Yeah.
It's fine to exile real artifacts from your graveyard because...
You didn't cast them. You didn't spend resources on
Yeah, exactly. Or they already got their usage.
Something I like in decks like this, and it was really good in my Chiscoria deck, was Noble's Purse. The 2-mana artifact, it enters tapped, and then you tap it and make a treasure. And you can do that 3 times. So at the end of the day, this creates 4 artifacts, just all on its own.
That sounds like rectangle theory from drafting. There's this theory in drafting, which is like kind of in modern Magic. How many rectangles does a card create? If it's more than one, it's probably good. Yeah, this one creates 4 rectangles.
4 rectangles.
Yeah.
In one. Do you pay 2 mana for 4 of those?
Yeah, over time. Yeah. This is actually great because it pays for a lot of the crafting cost.
Yeah, and if you can empty the purse isn't doing anything for you. Definitely get rid of it.
Yeah, at that point, it's worthless. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a perfect thing to craft away with. But like you said, it is way better to craft stuff that is in your graveyard.
Yeah, and I think that's what I would look for too, is artifacts that get themselves into the graveyard, preferably cheaply and while replacing themselves.
Yes.
So Ether Spellbomb, I know you love bounce.
I love a bounce.
Yeah, and I love Ether Spellbomb in general. The great thing about this is it can work on either end. You play it for 1 mana, and you can pay a blue, sack it, and bounce a creature. Or you can just pay a generic sack it and draw a card. Oftentimes, early in the game, bouncing their commander will set them back like an entire important turn. Yeah. That can be very powerful, much more powerful than people think. But if there's nothing there, you can always just sack it, draw the card, and you can usually fit those mana in someplace where you weren't going to use those mana anyway, and now you've got an artifact sitting there in your graveyard.
Easy.
Yeah. Any artifacts that have cycling
are
possibilities. So Mnemonic Sphere is a good one. It's 1 in a blue for an artifact. You can pay 1 in a blue to sacrifice it and draw 2 cards, but it has channel for just a blue, discard it and draw a card.
Easy. Pay blue, it replaces itself. Now you got an artifact in your graveyard, you're loaded.
Yep. Glass Dust Hulk is another one. This is a 3/4 for 5 mana that says whenever another artifact enters the battlefield under your control, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn and can't be blocked. But it has cycling for a hybrid Azorius mana, which is discard and draw this card. And again, you're going to cycle it every time. You never really want to cast this card. But it just replaces itself and puts an artifact in your graveyard. And you're just setting up for that turn when you're going to craft.
Yeah, I mean, trying to get 6 artifacts in your graveyard is like quest 1, right? Like
this is a 3 CMC commander.
Yeah. And you have to, and 4 to activate. So you need to really get them in there fast. It reminds me of Octavia a little bit because like you're trying to load up your graveyard. So your commander only costs 2.
Yeah.
So you don't have to pay 10 for it because that's too much.
But by the time you load up your graveyard enough, maybe you could have just paid 10.
Maybe.
Yeah.
So this one's definitely like you want as cheap of things as possible, but also you want like artifacts or artifact synergy cards that mill you just immediately because there aren't going to be enough like double-sided artifacts to really trigger this milling thing enough, and exposing your 3-mana commander just for the mill part of it is a little dangerous. So I think this deck wants like an Emery Lurker of the Lock, which will ETB and mill and lets you use your graveyard a little bit. Altar of Dementia gives you a sack outlet to sack whatever artifact creatures are on the battlefield, but also mill yourself. Grinding Station is a really good mill outlet with artifacts. Yeah, you sack an artifact and that player puts the top 3 cards of their library into their graveyard. And then whenever an artifact comes into play, you can untap the Grinding Station. So you could even do this a couple of times. Mesmeric Orb, we've mentioned a few times on this episode already, is just it's going to mill your opponents too, which can be a downside or can be an upside. But in general, it's a wash. So it's just good for you as a very cheap way to mill a bunch of cards. Yeah, I mean, there's also just no faster way to mill yourself than wheels, right? Yeah. Windfall, Wheel of Misfortune, anything you can do to just pitch this hand and get a fresh one is going to go. Like Memory Jar seems awesome. Yeah. It's an artifact, and you bin your whole hand. It seems really great. Yeah, you're in red and blue, so Looting, Rummaging, Cathartic Reunion, those are going to be, I think, quite good because they allow you to put a couple of artifacts into the yard. Yeah. Especially when you have lands that are also artifacts. So when you're good on lands, you can be pitching the artifact lands because you really don't want to be crafting with the lands you have in play. You want to be crafting with lands you have in your graveyard. Yeah. Anvil of Gogarden is a good one. Each player skips his or her discard phase, and then during each player's draw phase, they draw an additional card and then choose and discard a card. So yeah, I like this one. It's Howling Mine, but nobody nets cards, but it does help you mill and is on an artifact. Yeah, the fact that they're on artifacts is really important because you might incidentally mill them with your other cards, and you want that to be something, that's in my graveyard. I'm not going to cast it this game, but it is helping me. Okay. Okay. Yep. We got the 6 artifacts in our graveyard. Yep. It wasn't hard at all. It was easy. We've cast our commander. Yep. We have the 4 mana also to exile this. Okay. It's ETBing.
You think that would be enough, but we actually have one more box we have to check before.
You have to have a double-sided thing to flip, and it has to be worth all of this. And, like, that's the crazy thing, is this card is so sweet, but there just aren't there's one insane payoff.
Yeah, there's only really one payoff that's worth all this.
Yeah.
And then there's a bunch where you're like, I guess if I don't have the good one, then at least I get something. But none of the other ones are even close.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one really good one is Azor's Gateway. Mm-hmm. The front side is a legendary artifact for 2 mana. You pay 1, you tap it, you draw a card, then exile a card from your hand. If cards with 5 or more different converted mana costs are exiled under Azor's Gateway, you gain 5 life, and then you untap and transform Azor's Gateway.
But we don't have to do any of this.
Right. Hopefully.
Because
I've done it. I've done it naturally before. It's hard, but I've done it. The other side is what you're going for, right? Because Tetzin is going to ostensibly transform this for free. Mm. So the other side is Sanctum of the Sun, which is an insane land that add X mana of any one color to your mana pool, where X is your life total.
Whoa! That's so much mana.
I mean, that is a worthwhile payoff because it'll be untapped.
Yeah.
You'll use it that turn, and you're like, is it good to add 30 mana to your mana pool every turn? Is that good?
Yeah, I think so.
I'll answer that confidently with yes.
Fairly confident. You also need a Walking Ballista or something to do with all this mana, but
sure. But I mean,
but having this is awesome.
Hopefully, you've built your deck in such a way that
Yeah, you've got like even just a hangerback walker.
And you've got a lot of card selection with your wheels and other stuff. And you're looking for certain things. Like this deck is going to be looking for double-sided artifacts, and you're not going to have a lot of them. So, yeah. I think there's a good chance you have a lot of cards in your hand when you do something like this, and you're able to parlay that into a big board at least.
There are a ton of these. Most of them are from Ixalan, which is the joke here. These are the Ixalan like artifacts that turn into lands. Conqueror's Galleon is a vehicle that normally you have to it has to come in, it has to attack, it has to survive combat, and you have to crew it for 4. But it flips into what is essentially like a trading market. Land. It taps for colorless. It also says 2 tap, draw a card, then discard card. 4 tap, draw a card. 6 tap, return target card from your graveyard to your hand.
It's the Sonic screwdriver of land.
Yeah, exactly. It sort of does it all a little expensively, but this is ramp, you see.
Sure, I got an extra landing blade, worth it.
Yeah. Dowsing Dagger, probably easier to flip by just hitting somebody with it, but it's good if you flip it.
It's true, because it becomes a land that taps for 3 mana of any one color.
It's a Gilded Lotus.
There you go. Golden Guardian.
This is actually a great land.
Yeah. And it is actually a little bit tough to flip. It flips into a land that you pay 4 mana, tap it, and creates a 4/4 artifact golem.
But it also adds 2 mana of any color, so it's a 2 mana land,
So it's both things where it's like ramp and it's also like an engine eventually. I don't know. I put this on here just because we're reaching.
It is a double-sided artifact in the strictest sense. It is a 3 mana artifact that taps to gain you 1 life. But the backside says tap, target player loses 5. I mean, that's a problem. Like, if you can do that repeatedly, if you could untap, like if you have artifact untap stuff, which you might do, that this whole deck is full of artifacts, that turns into that's pretty good.
I appreciate how nice you're being about it.
That's we don't play Lava Axes
unless you look at Lava Axe every turn.
They cost 7 mana and exile and Lava Axe every turn. But there's also there's some new craft.
Yeah.
So this is where you're really...
There's 2.
There's others. They're just not... These are the rares. This is where most of your double-sided artifacts are going to be coming from.
This set.
Is from this set. And this one's pretty sweet. The Ever-Flowing Well. It's 2 and a blue. When it enters the battlefield, mill 2 cards, then draw 2 cards. Perfect. That's exactly what we want. At the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 8 or more permanent cards in your graveyard, transform the Ever-Flowing Well. So we could probably transform this by ourselves with the other stuff, but we're doing it free. It turns into a land that says whenever you cast a permanent spell using mana produced by this land,
called the Myriad Pools.
The Myriad Pools. Up to 1 other target permanent you control becomes a copy of that spell until end of turn. So now you get 2 of every spell you cast. So you probably take a clue token or a treasure token and you turn it into a copy of whatever artifact you just cast.
Yeah.
Which is pretty sweet.
You're 100% going to flip that before you can flip the commander.
Yes.
Because you already want to do the stuff it's telling you to do. But that's good. It's helping you along your plan. The other one we're going to call out is Matzalantli, the Great Door. It's in the legendary artifact. You tap it to draw a card, then discard a card. We like that. But you can pay 4, tap, and transform it. Activate only if there are 4 or more permanent types among cards in your graveyard. Again, might be able to do that, but you're going to be pretty heavy artifact,
tough,
so
yeah.
it might not be these. And it turns into the core, a land that taps to add X mana of any one color, where X is the number of permanent cards in your graveyard.
And that is serious.
Yeah.
Like, this is a very powerful land. So there's like 2 big payoffs in this deck where you're like, okay, we've done it. Now we have a ton of mana. Now what?
Yeah.
And the answer is flip incubate tokens.
That's the other thing we can do.
Yeah.
Is flip incubate tokens. Man, if I get enough artifacts into the graveyard, I cast Tetzin, and then I pay all the stuff, and I have it, and I flip it over, and I get an incubate token flipped over, and that's my payoff, and 2 gnomes.
Yeah.
I don't know.
There's clearly some really sweet payoffs for this. And there's a lot of less sweet payoffs for this. Which means that this is probably a casual deck that runs a good amount of tutors to find like the big pieces that you're flipping. Particularly instant speed tutors go a long way.
Yeah, I think so. War of Invention, so you can sneak in your Azor's Gateway right before, like, it's the end step before your turn. No one cares about Tetzin because it seems nuts. And also, you don't have a double-faced.
And they haven't read it, and they don't want to read it.
And they're like, okay, they look at it, do you have a double-faced artifact out? No, no, I don't. Okay. And then on the end step, you're like, War of Invention, Azor's Gateway, untap, do the thing, flip the Azor's Gateway. So that's nice. So yeah, the instant speed ones are a lot better because you do have to reveal. So if you fabricate which you probably still play fabricate.
Yeah.
I don't like tutors myself. I don't advocate for them a lot. But in a deck like this where there's so little support, it feels justified because what are you going to get with your tutor? It's not a combo piece exactly.
Yeah.
Azor's Gateway is still a pretty fair Magic card. So maybe it's fine. But if you fabricate for it, they see it coming. They know what you're doing. You had to do it at sorcery speed during your turn. It's going to be a lot less likely they let that happen.
So you got to be a little tricksy. You got to have a lot of mana to make this happen. But as a reward, you will get even more mana.
Yeah.
Which is very cool. I wanted to talk about this commander, not necessarily because it's the most powerful one in the set, but because this is not something we've seen before. Like double-sided token, payoffs is not something we've ever it hasn't really been
double-sided artifacts for sure.
Yeah.
We've had werewolf commanders.
That care about that kind of stuff. But having that transform is a very fun thing to build, and this is a very tricky commander to build. So I wanted to take some time on it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting.
Okay.
All
this
right.
next one you played on Game Nights.
Yes, this is the deck I will be playing on the new episode of Game Nights, which is not out yet at the time we're releasing this, but it is it's a cool deck.
Yeah.
It's the Mycotyrant, 1 a green and a black for a star legendary elder fungus. It has trample. The Mycotyrant's power and toughness are each equal to the number of creatures you control that are fungi or sapperlings. At the beginning of your end step, create X 1/1 black fungus creature tokens with this creature can't block, where X is the number of times you descended this turn. And that means you descend each time a permanent card is put into your graveyard from anywhere.
This is sweet.
So you can mill, you can dredge, you can discard, you can sacrifice your stuff. However you get permanents into your graveyard, it will count towards descend.
Notably, this is permanent cards. Tokens aren't cards. They do not trigger descent. They do not live in your graveyard. It is permanent cards that were put into your graveyard. This is sweet. I mean, you can make a ton of tokens this way.
Yeah. They can't block, which is a big deal.
Yeah.
I do like this design they've been doing recently. I think they've sort of found a way to make tokens a little bit more fair. But yeah, it's not that hard, right? Because any way a permanent gets into your graveyard will start the tally. And if you just discard 5 cards, that counts, and you get 5, one ones that can't block. 3. Yeah. So it does get out of hand really, really fast.
Golgari Grave Troll is sort of a classic dredge card. It has dredge 6, so you can replace any of your draws by milling 6 cards. I think this deck is going to be 100% permanence, 80% permanent.
Probably not quite 100%, but it's probably got 10 or less instant sorceries.
Where the deck you have a high density descend, so you're probably milling, you're descending for 5 or maybe 6.
Yeah, I'd say 9 out of 10 cards you mill or discard or dredge or whatever, you want them to be permanents for sure. Yeah. Golgari Grave Troll's amazing. Hermit Druid.
It's a great way to mill one land.
If you include Hermit Druid, you probably don't want very many basics at all.
We've said it before, we'll say it again. Altar of Dementia is a great card for this deck. Your commander gets bigger and bigger each turn too, so you can really mill yourself for a lot, recast your commander, and then make even more Saprolings. Seems pretty wild.
Yeah, it's a really cool deck and a really easy to make a lot of tokens very quickly.
So now you have all these tokens. What are we doing with them?
Yeah, I mean, you want to pump them, obviously, because you're going to be able to swing in with them. So Tender Shoot Dryad's really, really good. Makes more Saprolings, but pumps the one you've got. Because you have so many tokens, you immediately get the City's Blessing.
Yeah.
Or making
City
even
loves
more.
you.
Yeah, I don't know why, but they do. Yeah, the City loves mushrooms, I guess. It loves fungus. So you can play things like Fungal Sprouting.
Just doubles the amount of tokens you have, basically.
Yeah.
It makes Saprolings equal to the greatest power among creatures you control, which is probably the Mycotyrant, who is huge from all the Saprolings you've been making.
Yeah, I really like this new card from Eldraine, Lich Knight's Conquest in this deck, because it's a 4 and a black for a sorcerer. You sacrifice any number of artifacts, enchantments, and or tokens, and then return that many creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. So you do all this huge milling.
Graveyard to the battlefield.
Graveyard to the battlefield, sorry, I said hand. You do all this milling, and it makes all these tokens, and then you're like, cool, I milled all this awesome stuff into my graveyard. I'm going to exchange my tokens for that real stuff. Mm-hmm. And you're like, I don't care, because I got 25 tokens, and I'll turn them into actual creature cards in my graveyard, which tends to be
Living Death wins games, and this is Living Death without helping your opponents with all
Right.
that, with their graveyards.
And of course, there's actual Living Death, which
that
really
too.
Good too. Yeah, because you do all this stuff, and you're like, oh, I have my commander, Hermit Druid, and 25 tokens.
Now what?
But I have 40 things in my graveyard. And you're like, cool, Living Death now, because I don't care about, and just get 30 things back.
I think this is definitely an Ayara deck, which is whenever a black creature enters the battlefield, you drain everybody. The funguses are black. So it triggers Ayara. It will end a game real fast that way. You're milling yourself, so Sir Conrad and Dreadhound are really great because they trigger when creatures go to your graveyard from anywhere. Yes, they both trigger on creatures specifically. So that turns that, weaponizes that mill.
Yep.
In addition to when all of those creatures die, they will drain as well.
Yeah. And then, it's a pretty straightforward deck from that point. I think it's like Overwhelming Stampede or Crater Hoof is a way to go. I think you have Gerard down here, which is another way to sort of turn sacrificing creatures into killing people.
If you have that many Saprolings, your Mycotyrant's huge, you might as well fling him at somebody.
Yeah. You attack one person, knock them out, and then fling them at another person.
It's also really easy to get Gerard from your graveyard into your hand. You just sacrifice a swamp and a forest.
Yep. So
Pretty
you milled it
sweet.
in there, you get it out later. Yeah.
Classic Golgari Stinky Guys.
Yeah. Golgari Dredge. And
it's awesome.
Yeah. It plays really fun. You always have stuff to do. I like the deck a lot. All right, this next commander is I've been looking for this one for years.
It's time. It is time that she exists, and we found her in the dinosaur deck of all places.
I think it makes sense because Enrage is a dinosaur mechanic, and I think the first time around, I was really hopeful that the first Ixalan would give us enough Enrage stuff, but it didn't quite. But I think now maybe we're there.
Wayta Trainer Prodigy is here. She's red, green, and white for a human warrior. She's a 1/5 with haste. She has 2 green tap. Target creature you control fights another target creature. This ability costs 2 less to activate if it targets 2 creatures you control. So you can make your creatures fight each other. Then it says, if a creature you control being dealt damage causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. So it's a Pain Harmonicon.
Pain Harmonicon. I like that. So yeah, this is the stop hitting yourself deck.
Yeah.
Finally getting a true commander. I tried years ago to build a deck. It never really came together. I hear from people all the time over the years who put it together, and we usually have to sort of hodgepodge a commander that's in the colors we want, that's kind of doing something that's, orthogonally related, but not, there's never been anything that just directly is like, listen, if you do damage to your own stuff, now I help you. And this is that card.
Yes. She is here to help you. She's here to have your creatures fight each other and to double those abilities. Just gives you everything that you want. This is like Stuffy Doll's dream, right?
Yes.
Stuffy Doll says when it is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to one opponent that you choose.
Yep.
When Stuffy Doll comes down.
But now it'll deal double that.
Yeah. That seems fine.
And she gives you the way to make Stuffy Doll take a lot of damage because you're like, what's your biggest creature? Stuffy Doll's going to fight that.
Yeah. He loses.
Yeah, it's a 6/6. You take 12.
Yeah. That's what you get for having a 6/6.
That's right. Brash Taunter's even more brutal.
Yeah. Brash Taunter picks all sorts of fights.
Yeah, because it fights on its own.
Yeah.
So it's like, and it's indestructible. So it's like, Wayta says, okay, you fight that thing. Brash Taunter's like, cool. Deal 12 to you. And then Brash Taunter's like, that's fun. Let's do that again.
I'm going to fight him again. You know what? I'm coming back.
Yeah. And I'm going to win this time.
I didn't, but you died. And that's important. There's a ton of creatures that have this sort of ability. Boros Reckoner is the famous one.
Yep.
Stuffy Doll and Brash Taunter are the best because they're indestructible, but Boros Reckoner and the new Donna Noble has like Soul Bond this. So you can give another creature this.
That's cool.
Which is pretty slick. Fiend Lash is an equipment that gives the equipped creature this ability. Mm-hmm. And then there is just a slurry of enrage triggers.
I love Hornet Nest you put on the list.
Yeah.
I've been wanting to do this for years and years. And, I did have a deck. Mine was Mardu, so I didn't have green in it, just because we didn't have many choices.
Yeah.
But I love that we have green here. And Hornet's Nest is 200 green for O2 with Defender, but it says whenever it's dealt damage, create that many 1/1 green insect creature tokens with flying and death touch.
I love this card.
Yeah.
It's the best ghostly prison in the business.
So you have a fight that 6/6. It's like, yeah, it dies, but I got 6 1/1 flying death touchers.
So buzz off. It goes very well with dinosaurs that have enraged triggers.
Yep.
Those are pretty easy to find, so I wanted to mention some other ones. Of course, Ranging Raptors and Ripjaw Raptors, but Elish Norn is also like the new Flip Elish Norn. I believe it also works here. It says whenever a source an opponent controls deals damage to you or a permanent you control, that source's controller loses 2 life unless they pay 1. So this doesn't get in the way of your fight stuff because it only
just
worries
an extra tax onto them.
Yeah, so it says if you attack me, like you're gonna take some as well, which is a little like goes along with the theme, even though it's Elish Norn is sort of snuck in here.
That's cool though. I like that.
And the saga's really good as well, but we're here for the front side.
Yep. There's things like Vrondis, of course. That's another enraged card. It makes 5/4s.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, I think that's what I was saying. I think we hit that tipping point where we're finally to the point where there's card draw, there's ramp, there's token creation, all based on creatures taking damage.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think that's a really cool aspect of the deck. Now, the question is, I don't think Wayta by herself is efficient enough at causing damage because she's like one thing fights one thing every turn. You're not going to get enough advantage out of doing that. So we need other ways to sort of deal damage to our own stuff.
Right. Pyrohemia, it's back.
It's back.
It's the best way to trigger Enrage, and it's really, really good here. A lot of the dinosaurs are sort of built to do this as well. Raging Sword Tooth is when it enters the battlefield, deals 1 to each other creature, just all of them. If I can put Goblin Sharpshooter in a deck, I'm going to do it.
That's your Tim.
I love him. This is a 3-mana 1/1 goblin that doesn't untap during your untap step, but whenever a creature dies, untap Goblin Sharpshooter, and then it taps and deals 1 damage to target creature or player.
So you can always tap to hit your own enraged stuff, but also finish off a creature. Or if you know you're going to fight something, deals 1 damage, get the value, fight something, kill the something, get the value, untap the Goblin Sharpshooter, tap it again. Yeah, it's really, really good.
It cleans up all the 1/1s on the board constantly. It's just, it does a lot of work.
I like the next one a lot, but it will mess up games and people will not like it. It's Ether Flash. It's 2 red for an enchantment. Whenever a creature comes into play, enters the battlefield, Ether Flash deals 2 damage to it. So this is really good with all your dinosaurs, your Brash Taunters, Stuffy Dolls, things like that as well, because every creature you play kind of automatically gets its thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if your opponents have a 2/2 commander,
they can just never play it.
Yeah, it's not. It's
or
rough.
they're a token deck.
Yeah.
Even if they're going to pump those tokens eventually, they're going to enter as small and they'll just always die.
Yep.
And so
this can be a very, very frustrating card to play against.
It can be oppressive, yeah. And because it's an enchantment, there are certain decks that are just like, well, I got 2 cards in my deck that can deal with enchantments because I'm in Rakdos or whatever.
Yep.
Yeah. So I generally think it doesn't fall in the same category as like all those edict effects, but it is a little bit on that side. Just be aware.
It can definitely turn off certain decks. I think this next version is a little bit less. It's still quite good, but it says whenever a creature attacks or blocks, Power Stone Minefield deals 2 damage to it. So now it's like...
They can choose whether to do it or not.
Right. And now it's a choice where it's like at least the thing has entered the battlefield and you can choose what of your creatures you want to send into battle. But Power Stone Minefield means just like if you're going to attack, it better be with something big.
We wanted to talk about the card repercussion here.
Yes. So there are some damage triggers that shouldn't be doubled.
Yeah.
This one says whenever a creature is dealt damage, repercussion deals that much damage to that creature's controller.
Now let's read Wayta.
Wayta only cares if a creature you control is being dealt damage, and it will double that trigger. So she will double the damage dealt to you.
From repercussion.
Yeah.
But not your opponent.
But not your opponents.
Right, because she doesn't double the damage-based stuff to your opponent's
their
stuff.
creatures. And you want to deal a bunch of damage to your creatures, so you have to like...
So don't put repercussion in this deck.
Yeah, just be careful. Because it's definitely one of the things where you're like, well, we're trying to deal damage to all these creatures, and if I've got Blasphemous Axe and I've got this, then I could do a repercussion, and then you kill yourself.
Yeah. You're like, everybody will take 13, but you'll take 26. Oh, that's bad.
Like, oh, okay.
Yeah. But all the red damage-based board wipes become really, really good here because, especially the small ones.
Yes.
Because they'll clean up the board of all the little stuff. Dinosaurs are generally big, or your Brash Hunters have indestructible, but you also get your enrage triggers and stuff.
Right. Like Spiteful Banditry. This is the first deck that I'm like, it is a Spiteful Banditry deck. This is the red enchantment, red X enchantment from Lord of the Rings. When it enters the battlefield, it deals X damage to each creature. Whenever one or more creatures your opponents control die, you create a treasure token. It only triggers once each turn.
And you can scale this to whatever. You look at your board and you go, okay, if I do it for 4, all this stuff lives, but all that stuff dies. I'm doing it for 4.
Great.
Yeah.
You get 1 treasure back, and then it just sits in play and gets you some value.
All right. And then, of course, you'll want all your protection stuff. Giving indestructible to your enraged stuff is generally good. Flawless Maneuver, Boros Charm.
Got to be ready. You're going to be dealing a lot of damage to your own stuff, and you'd like to keep them in play. I really liked Shielded by Faith in this deck. This is it's an aura that gives the enchanted creature indestructible, but whenever a creature enters the battlefield, you may attach Shielded by Faith to that creature. So as you could put it on whatever creature, but if you find a better creature for it, you're like, actually, I'm going to move this onto the Boros Reckoner or something like that.
And then I just wanted to give an obligatory shout out to Drum Bellower and Seedborn Muse because Wayta is required to tap to do it. And this will be a mana hungry deck where you want to activate your Pyrohemia a few times. You're going to be able to use your excess mana. So, yeah.
Okay.
Right. That's a cool one.
We have talked about a lot of commanders. We have more to go.
4 left.
More commanders. Some of my favorites in this set, honestly. But we're going to get to them after a few words from our sponsors.
Mint Mobile presents The Rite of Belzenlock. With this dark ritual, I summon thee, Demon Lord Belzenlock. Why have you disturbed me, mortal?
Demons know about contract stuff, right?
Indeed.
Okay, great, because I've got this super complicated wireless contract, and I was hoping...
Whoa, hold up. Look, I'm evil, but Big Wireless, they're evil.
Right? They lured me in with this free phone, and now I keep getting surprise fees and overage charges.
I know, dude, it's diabolical. Take it from me, you gotta switch to Mint Mobile. They offer premium wireless for just $15 a month. All plans come with unlimited talk and text, plus high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can keep your phone and bring your old number, along with all your existing contacts.
Wow, that is amazing. I'm gonna switch right now. Okay, well, that's all I needed you for, so...
Oh, all right.
To get your new wireless plan for $15 a month and get the plan shipped to your door for free, go to mintmobile.com/command. That's mintmobile.com/command. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/command. I think it might need more card draw.
Who are you talking to? Or is that just something you say?
Oh, no, I'm on a call with Jimmy. We're building a Chatterfang deck.
Ooh, I just added Toski. That should help, right?
Whoa, the card just showed up.
Yeah, with ARCHIDEKT, you can collaborate in real time from anywhere in the world.
Changes show up immediately. You don't even have to reload the page.
So it's perfect for brewing with a friend.
This is cool, but isn't Jimmy just upstairs?
Yeah, but I'm downstairs right now.
I ain't coming downstairs. ARCHIDEKT is the best place to browse, brew, and playtest commander decks. Just go to archidekt.com/command zone to get started.
That's ARCHIDEKT.com/command zone. All right, we are back. We are talking about the best and most powerful commanders from the Lost Caverns of Ixalan. We've gone through 8. We've got 4 to go.
This one's one of my favorites. I love the art on it so much. It's Xavier Sal Infested Captain. Black, green, blue for a human fungus pirate.
And he has stuff growing on his face.
Incredible type line.
It looks like Davy Jones a little bit.
Yeah, we're doing a Pirates of the Caribbean thing here. It's a 3-mana 3/3. It has 2 activated abilities. Tap, remove a counter from another permanent you control. Populate, activate only as a sorcery. And tap, sacrifice another creature. Proliferate, activate only as a sorcery.
I like that balance there. Of like, oh, you want more creatures? Take off counters. You want more counters? Take off creatures.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of the old, not Skellions, but it's like remove a counter to make a Thopter. And sack a Thopter to put a counter on it. But it's on a pirate with fungus on his face.
Okay, so the first thing I notice is it says remove a counter from another permanent you control. There's no type of counter specified.
Nope.
So it can do all kinds of things.
Yeah. First thing I saw when I saw this was like, Saga deck.
Yep.
We're removing lore counters. We're reusing abilities. It's only going to be the first 2 because it is sorcery speed.
Right. So you never get to the 3rd chapter, take it off before you'd have to sacrifice it.
Right.
Yeah. But it makes a lot of sense. You can get those first 2 chapters over and over. And if one of those first 2 chapters creates a token of some kind, now that's just an engine on itself, right? Remove the counter, copy the token that the saga made, and now it's going to replay a chapter that maybe makes another token.
Right.
That's very cool. I think that synergy and that loop is nice.
Urza Saga makes great tokens, obviously, because the more you have, the more better they are. So populate's really strong there. Kiora Best, the Sea God, makes 8/8 blue Krakens with hexproof.
That's good.
Let's make a few more of those. Let's keep doing that for sure. It also has some really good other abilities, but those are just incidental.
Right, exactly. Once you have an 8/8 with hexproof, that's all you're taking about. How
could you lose?
Yeah, you put the new from Doctor Who Genesis of the Daleks here. Yeah. So this one is the one that has chapters 1, 2, and 3 are create a 3/3 black Dalek artifact creature token with menace for each lore counter on Genesis of the Daleks. So you'd let it get to 3. It makes 3 3/3s with menace. Then you take a lore counter off.
Make 3 again.
You'll populate, make a 4th, and then it'll make 3 more, and you'll have 7. The next, Yeah.
By the time you get to that final chapter where they have to decide to blow up all the Daleks or to blow up everything else, they have to blow up everything else.
They have to blow up the...
Yeah. Otherwise, they just get drained by all of the Daleks' power. So I really liked stuff that combines powerful counters with powerful tokens.
Yeah.
The better the counters are that you can proliferate, the better this is. So sagas are really great because you can move forward or move backward with your commander. But planeswalkers are also quite good specifically with the proliferate side of it.
Yeah.
I liked Tevesh Zot is both a planeswalker that makes tokens that are expendable and has a very powerful ultimate. So you can tick up Tevesh Zot to 6 from 4 to 6, make 2 thralls, sacrifice one of the thralls, put him up to 7, and that -10 that steals every commander gets closer and closer.
Turn away. Well, 2 turns, but
almost immediately available to you.
Yeah, that's pretty nice. I like that. So again, you want planeswalkers probably that create tokens.
Right.
So that you have that dual ability to I can proliferate with using the token as the creature I'm sacrificing, or I could populate. You could remove a loyalty counter if you wanted with...
Yeah, if you have a good enough token.
Yeah, or if just, I need another creature on the board or whatever.
Yeah.
I like the idea of, it gives me that flexibility of just, depending on the situation, I can go in either direction here.
Right.
That's pretty cool.
There are, of course, also bad counters that we need to get rid of to make sure that you don't lose stuff. Like a Mystic Remora has a cumulative upkeep, which means that a counter gets put on it at the beginning. You will have to pay that 1 because you can't remove it before you pay for it. But
You don't have to ever let it get to 2.
Nope. You can remove that counter every single time and have a Mystic Remora for as long as you and Xavier would like to pay for it.
That's pretty cool. I didn't think of the age counters on the cumulative upkeep, but that's a good way to keep Elephant Grass, Glacial Chasm.
Yeah.
These are very powerful cards. Mystic Remora, obviously, the most powerful of all. And
they have a cumulative upkeep for a reason.
Yeah. This turns them into an upkeep of 1 as long as you have your commander out and you're willing to activate that part of it.
The other side of this is making great tokens.
Right. So the populate part is exciting, but I think populate only becomes exciting when you have really cool tokens to make copies of. Like just making a 2/2 is, not as good as making, I don't know, it could be anything, because blue has stuff like Cackling Counterpart that is just a card that makes a token copy of target creature you control. So you can choose any of your creatures, make a token copy of it, and now when you populate, you're making real stuff.
Real cards.
Yeah.
They represent full cards at that point.
That have ETBs or that do other stuff or that create tokens themselves. So I think that's going to be a key. And this is similar to, I forget which other commander we were talking about earlier, where it's like make sure you pick your lane of, you should probably know, flexibility is good, but you should probably know generally, like, is this a token populate? Is that more what I want to do? Or is this a proliferate? That's more what I want to do. Yeah.
You need a little bit of both, obviously, to fuel his engine, because you need counters to populate. But of course, if you're like, all right, I'm going to be doing a saga deck where I'm proliferating and like controlling the counters, or I'm doing a clone deck that is focused on making token copies or just big tokens that I want to populate, or I'm doing planeswalkers that, make big tokens, or I'm just racing to ultimate or something like that.
Yeah. So if somebody asks you, like, what percentage are you proliferate and what percentage are you populate? You should know the answer.
Yeah.
I'm 70% populate. Okay, that's more of a token deck. Oh, I'm 70% proliferate. Oh, that's more of a manipulating counters.
Right.
Either Planeswalker or maybe Infect or something like that deck.
Yeah. I love the populate version of this deck. There's so many cool, like Helm of the Host, where you make non-legendary copies of Xavier Sol. Go nuts.
Now you can populate the crap out of stuff and proliferate. Yeah, exactly.
So there are like really cool things that you can do with the token side of this that are really interesting to me. Something that we talked about is there's very powerful proliferate commanders already. So the fact that you have to tap it to just proliferate once may not make this the best proliferate commander you're looking for, but it has 3 colors, so maybe it adds something like...
Yeah, it's hard for me to imagine this being better than like a Traxa for a Super Friends deck.
Yeah, that's true. I always forget about it.
Yeah, but that doesn't, you don't have to do the best version of your deck, but it is tough for me to think, like, from a proliferate standpoint, if this is going to be the best, just because proliferate's the type of thing you want to do multiple times in turn when you can.
Yeah.
Or it's free. The cost of, like, I have to tap it is a real cost, but maybe put in some untappers, and some other stuff like that. There's probably we're gonna get to this here.
Yeah, you want to get to the combo.
Yeah, now that we're talking about tapping and untapping,
it's time. It's come to the moment in the episode where we bring up Intruder Alarm. So Intruder Alarm says when a creature enters, untap all creatures.
Yep.
That's just happens. So of course that means if a counter enters
and make a creature somehow.
If a counter entering makes a creature, then we can untap Xavier and do it again.
And proliferate, yeah.
And vice versa. If a token entering creates a counter, then it will untap Sal, and it will work that way.
Keep going, yeah. So Scurry Oak is the card that works on one end, which is whenever one or more 1/1 counters are put on Scurry Oak, you may create a 1/1 squirrel creature token. So you proliferate, it puts a counter on Scurry Oak, that makes a squirrel, triggers Intruder Alarm, untaps Xavier, and you're like, cool, sacrifice that squirrel that just got made to proliferate, Scurry Oak, blah, blah, blah. That's infinite sort of tapping, untapping of Xavier. On the other end is like Champion of Lambholt, and that says whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, champion gets +1/+1 counter. So now you go, okay, I'm going to
remove a counter. Populate a creature token I have.
When that populate comes in, puts the counter on Champion of Lambholt, and that untaps Xavier Sol, and then I do that again. That one's a little bit better because you end up with a whole lot of creatures. You're not having to sack the creatures to proliferate. In the Skirioak version, you want a couple planeswalkers out so that you're proliferating onto the Skirioak is incidental, and what you're really doing is putting extra counters on your Liliana Death's Majesty or something. Yeah. So Renata will do a sort of similar thing to Champion of Lambhold. Yeah. There's a lot of ways with Intruder Alarm to kind of go off. But congratulations, we broke Intruder Alarm.
It's good.
Okay. Oh man, you did this on purpose because I have to read this one.
It's a cutie though.
Yeah, the art on this is really cool. You keep saying cute, but from a scale perspective, I think it's ginormous.
Yeah, it's just a big cute. You go, oh.
It's cute like the dragon from the Neverending Story, like Falcor.
Yeah, it is very Falcory.
Okay, it is Xolatoyac, the Smiling Flood. It is 4, a green and a blue for a 6/6 legendary creature, Salamander Serpent. Whenever Xolatoyac, the Smiling Flood, enters the battlefield or attacks, put a flood counter on target land. That land is an island in addition to its other types for as long as it has a flood counter on it. At the beginning of your end step, untap each permanent you control with a counter on it.
Pretty good.
So obviously this makes your lands untap, just the ones that have gotten counters. But Xolatoyac does not care where the counters came from. It doesn't have to be the flood counters that it's putting onto things. So things that put counters on themselves or counters on other things, you'll probably set up and play this at a point where you have a lot of that and you're untapping a lot of your things, maybe your whole board on your end step. Yeah,
I would think you want mana rocks with charge counters on them, like a Coalition Relic or an Everflowing Chalice.
Yeah.
Things that like just naturally have counters on them and will untap themselves. Like Strixhaven Stadium has that weird game, but the point is it puts counters on itself and then untaps itself, right?
Yeah. What was that game called? Blitzball? Nope, that was Final Fantasy. I feel like we should
Quidditch.
Is not Quidditch.
Yeah, it's called Legally Distinct Quidditch.
Legally nondescript Quidditch.
The game's sweet, by the way. If you can win with the game, do it. It's just, I like that it automatically puts counters on itself, which means that it will untap with your commander.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really cool.
This is a great one ring commander. I know every commander is a great one ring commander. But
yeah, we found it. We found the deck that the one ring goes in.
It's really good in this one.
Yeah, untap it on your end step every end step.
Oh, so you draw one and then two. And then untap it, take two. You've drawn 3 cards at this point. Oh no.
Yeah, and of course there's a bunch of creatures that put counters on themselves or move counters around.
Yeah.
Goldberry. This is a card we've talked about a few times.
I love this card.
Yeah. Just it plays in all these weird margins where you're like, so you can tap Goldberry to move a counter of each kind not on Goldberry from another target permanent you control onto Goldberry. And then you can pay a blue and tap Goldberry to move one or more counters from Goldberry onto another target permanent. And then if you do, you draw a card. So you can kind of say, she goes like, give me those counters. Okay, I'll give them over here and move them around.
And I'm going to draw a card.
Yeah.
The fact that it untaps Goldberry makes this so good because it's like tap to move counters, untap it, tap to draw the card, untap it.
Put a counter over on that thing.
Yeah.
Particularly sort of lands and there's probably good stuff in your deck that you want to, that don't naturally get counters themselves and you want to get a counter onto them.
You can move, like she'll move a charge counter onto whatever land. There's like, I'll take that +1 counter and give it to your Ancient Tomb.
Yeah.
Like it just... It makes the engine go so much faster.
Yeah.
Rich Carpima Renegade is great in this deck because it comes in, puts counters on 2 things that'll untap, and they tap for mana right away. Really, really strong.
I really like this one you put down, which is Yisan.
Yeah, Yisan the Wanderer. You don't
gosh.
think about him putting counters on himself, but he puts verse counters. It's 2 and a green, tap, put a verse counter on Yisan. Search your library for a creature card with mana value equal to the number of verse counters on Yisan, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. So these days, Yisan feels a little slow, but if you have to activate him right away, get a 1-drop, untap him, activate him, get a 2-drop, and then untap.
By the time you're getting 3 or more, it's always worth it it.
Yeah.
And you're tutoring that card.
Yeah, you're drawing and casting it for 3 mana, and you're probably untapping other mana dorks to activate this ability, or just lands.
And the great thing is this deck probably has Goldberry and a number of other ways to move counters around because, Yusan gets a little high sometimes.
The Ozolith.
Yeah, the Ozolith. Yusan, I remember the days when it was like the best CEDH commander. That's like a long time ago. But like you said, I smiled for you to say it's a little slow because, I think that's how they feel about it now,
These days, he's a little slow.
Yeah. There's a new card from OB1 called Armor Scrapgorger. This is 1 and a green for an 0/3. It gets +3/0 as long as it has 3 or more oil counters on it. You can tap it to add a mana of any color, but it says whenever Armored Scrapgorger becomes tapped, exile target card from a graveyard and put an oil counter on it. So it's graveyard hate. It gets counters. It's going to untap. Like, this is just...
It does it all.
It's amazing.
It's so good in this deck. And this card has been sort of awkward in games I've played with it. I was excited to play with it because you tap and exile something, but you want to use it on your turn.
Yeah.
So you can't use it as like instant speed graveyard hate a lot of the time. And now you can.
Yeah, untap and wait. You do have to exile something with it. So if you're the only thing with something in your graveyard, it will exile it, which is probably not a big deal for this deck. But yeah.
Cool. Anything with counters on it and a tap ability goes a long way in this deck, of course. But the coolest thing you can do with this deck is lands with counters.
Yeah, I didn't think about this. You put Vivid lands down. I was like, holy crap.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's the coolest thing.
The Vivid Creek and Vivid Grove come in with charge counters, and they tap for 1 color, but you remove the counters and they tap for any color, but they just have the counters.
Yeah.
You don't have to do anything.
You don't remove counters. You just leave them on there so they'll untap.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Blast Zone also comes in with a charge counter on it and is great in this deck because it's a good mana sink and is a little controlled board wipe. You probably put the storage lands in here, although they are quite bad.
Yeah, because even then you still have to add mana to them. They don't tap for mana on their own.
Yeah.
So even though they're untapping, you're like, yeah, but I still don't tap them for mana every turn. I have to add stuff. I don't know about storage lands. I was thinking about that too.
But you put storage counter, and this one does. Crucible of the Spirit Dragon does make mana on it.
Crucible of the Spirit Dragon is fine, yeah.
But Sapper's End Cove and Rushwood Grove are pretty tough.
I think it probably knows, yeah.
Yeah, if you have a Yavimaya, they do just tap for mana now.
Oh, that's not actually okay.
Then they put a counter on themselves.
Yeah, maybe.
A combo. Best one ever, though, Erixmathes. Come on.
Wow.
2 green and blue Erixmathes enters the battlefield with 5 slumber counters on it. As long as Erixmathes has slumber counters on it, it's a land. Whenever you cast a spell, you may remove a slumber counter from Erixmathes. In this deck, I don't even know if you remove all the counters or if you just keep them as a green-blue land.
You could keep him at 1 for a while, but
it
is a 12-12,
it is
so
a
eventually
12-12.
you
probably could start hitting people with your Kraken.
Yeah, that's very cool.
There are other ways to put counters on lands. We talked about it in the 99 for Doctor Who. I had to mention the Flood of Mars in this deck. It puts island counters on lands as similar to your commander.
Yeah, flood counters.
Flood counters. So you can put them on your lands probably in this one. But it also turns other creatures into Flood of Mars.
Yeah.
So, you can create a little chaos.
Yeah, it feels like the first thing you do is turn one of your other creatures into Flood of Mars so that now you've got 2 creatures that are putting flood counters. And then you just do all your lands.
Yeah,
So
and now
they'll all
your
untap.
lands. Yeah.
Yeah. And then maybe you can start some shenanigans where you start giving other people Flood of Mars and see what happens. But that's going to suck because you're going to play your commander, they're going to turn it into a Flood of Mars, and now you're not untapping.
And you're like, no.
Yeah.
My boy. My smiling flood. I think it's his name. I liked Carpet of Flowers in this deck.
Yeah, because you can
give your
flood.
opponents islands.
Yeah, that's true. You can give them islands so that you can get a bunch of extra mana.
We've talked about Carpet of Flowers being like a really, really powerful card that we don't necessarily put in casual decks.
Yeah.
But when I have like a specific synergy for it, I will usually sneak them in.
Yeah, because it's like, listen, I'm not just taking advantage of the fact of that the meta tends to make this good. It's like my deck specifically makes this good.
I'm not making 2 extra mana with this. I'm making 10 extra mana with it, which feels cooler. I don't know. I don't know if that's justifiable, but...
The things we tell ourselves.
All right.
High Tide, also really good, because you are likely to have 100% islands at some point.
Right.
Okay, the question here, and we wrote this down similar to Carmen, which is like, how do you win?
Now
what do you
what?
do? Yeah, how does this deck play? And obviously going to have to play a lot at flash speed or the ability to, because you're untapping your whole thing that you're doing is untapping your stuff on end step. So you want either activated abilities on creatures that you're putting counters on so that they can be activated. But a lot of times that's going to be for mana, right? They're going to be mana dorks.
Yeah.
So what are you spending the mana on? You need to make sure you have a lot of instants and ways to use your mana on other players' turns to take advantage of your advantage. So Psych Rift, Capsize is a really good one.
I loved Capsize. Also, it's super flavorful.
Yeah.
Because you're a sea monster.
That's true. I'm
so
gonna
you're
flip
knocking their
over that
boats
boats
over.
Yeah, and this is a way to just like, however much extra mana I've got, I can soak it into Capsize as long as it's in multiples of 6 and get advantage. So that's really nice.
Start hitting people with your big serpent. You do have a 6/6. This is a +1 counters deck, probably, because it's a great way to just put counters on all of your creatures super easily. So put more counters on them. Start hitting people with them.
Yeah, although I'd say a lot of creatures don't benefit a ton from being untapped.
Yeah.
So you may not, like if you have a lot of +1/+1 counters cards, they may not do much other than it's basically like, would you play a card that said give your creatures vigilance? Like, yeah, I think it might be better to have,
Yeah, I mean, you could run Cryptolith Rites and that kind of thing in this deck.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think it might be better to have, a sort of mix. Some creatures that put counters on other creatures and themselves, like Rishkar, but then mix that with creatures that like tap to draw cards or do other things. For
sure. I just think this deck, a way it could win is like a Defiler of Vigor that puts a bunch of counters on all your stuff and eventually you swing out for combat damage. It's going to outgrind your opponents is the actual win con. You're just going to have more mana. You're going to have more cards. You're going to get there.
Yeah.
But you do need a little bit of oomph behind your plan to close it out.
Yeah, these kind of decks can have a lot more card draw than most decks because you'll always have mana to sink into it. Agatha's Soul Cauldron you got down here, which is cool.
It is a good home for Agatha's Soul Cauldron because it is both a +1/+1 counter deck and an activated ability deck.
Yep.
I think this is a great home for a Walking Ballista that you can exile under the Agatha's Soul Cauldron, remove all of them. It gives you sort of a combo-y win con, but at least it's a little bit more concise than some of the other stuff. Yeah. Really cool stuff that you can do with Xolatoyac. It's classic green-blue value on a big smiling sea serpent.
Yep. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's going to do it for the Lost Caverns of Ixalan cards, but that doesn't mean we're done.
Nope.
There are other cards in this set.
We have to stop. They're gonna demonetize it. We really are. It's too close.
Hey, we got you into the singing. We did it.
It's in the middle of the episode. Welcome to Jurassic Park.
Right, so there are these Jurassic Park cards in the set. That was pretty good. You should do the next Blue Planet or whatever.
Yeah. I was like, I don't know where we're coming in the song. We're coming in at the beginning. Okay. We got it.
It says on the outline.
Cue music.
So I was like, okay, here we go.
Yeah, here we go.
I know what to do.
No, we're queuing.
Been doing this for years. Okay.
So there's some sweet new legends from the Jurassic World franchise. These ones are from Jurassic Park specifically. We're only going to talk about a couple of them, but they're awesome. So we had to mention them.
I wasn't sure about this first one, but we talked about it and you kind of sold me on it. There's a lot of cool stuff going on.
It's really cool. It's Ian Malcolm, Chaotician. 1 blue, red for a human scientist. He's a 2/2. Whenever a player draws their second card each turn, that player exiles the top card of their library. During each player's turn, that player may cast a spell from among the cards they don't own, exiled with Ian Malcolm, and mana of any type can be spent to cast it. So we need a bunch of ways to make sure everybody's drawing 2 cards on their turn. So it's like the Howling Mines and that kind of stuff.
Yep.
But then everybody has access to everybody's cards basically all the time.
Yeah, it's like this pool of cards in the middle that you can kind of choose one to play from. Now, you can't choose your own. That's very interesting. So you just have access to your opponent's, some amount of cards from your opponent's decks. Yeah, that is the essence of chaos. Now I'm here by myself, talking to myself. So Kami of the Crescent Moon, Dictate of Crufix, Fevered Visions. There's a million cards in these colors that are basically like everybody's every turn gonna draw an extra card or 2 or whatever. Yeah. So that first part's an easy hurdle, right? You can just make it so like, all right, every turn we're throwing some cards in the middle.
I also particularly like these because if they get exiled and your opponents can cast them, they're still furthering your game plan, right?
Yeah.
They're universal effects that it's like, oh, you want to cast my Kami? Great. Glad somebody spent mana on it. So they're sort of free to throw into the pot.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing as we were sort of theory crafting the deck of like, okay, so how do you gain advantage from this? Because a lot of the cards you can think of that would be great are like, yeah, but some percentage of the time I have to give my opponents access to this thing I built that's got great synergy with what's going on. It'll be great for them too.
Right.
Yeah, so I like that thought of like, well, Howling Mine isn't particularly that. It is a card, hey, I give you access to it. You want to cast it. It's going to help everybody.
Yeah.
Including me.
You can be the hero.
Yeah.
I don't mind.
I mean, I love every game that has a Howling Mine in it.
Yeah.
Because it does just make everybody, everybody gets to do stuff. Nobody gets mana screwed. It's great. So any excuse to put those cards in your deck is good.
Be the player who brings the Howling Mine to the table. Everybody will love it. There's a lot of ways to do that. You could put the Monarch in play is a great way to make sure that this gets triggered pretty regularly as well. That's the next question is how do you build around this in a way that isn't so dangerous that like you're giving your opponents a ton of value from casting your cards?
Yeah, how do you make it so that you've got advantage or that you've thought about like the environment that you're now playing in, which is an environment where opponents have access to other players' cards and are casting and have things probably on their battlefield that belong to others.
And it's interesting because it's like there are a lot of ways to build synergy around this. Like you could play your passionate archaeologists and your fairy masterminds. These are cards that we've talked about a lot on these episodes that say like whenever a player draws draws 2 cards, you get value. Whenever a player casts or whenever you cast a spell from exile, you get value. But yeah, giving those to your opponents is pretty dangerous.
Those are cool cards though. Ghostly Pilfer.
Ghostly Pilfer is awesome in this deck.
It's amazing in this deck because people are going to want to get that value, and there's going to be at a certain point enough cards sort of in that pool that there's going to be good choices. They're going to want to cast them. Ghostly Pilfer lets you draw cards every time they do because they're casting those cards from exile. Extraordinary
Journey is a new one that says whenever a creature enters from exile, you draw a card. It only triggers once per turn, but it also lets you bounce stuff, which is pretty sweet.
Yeah.
Which is really good in this deck if your opponents cast your stuff.
Yeah.
If you're like, oh, you did cast my Ghostly Pilfer. Well, good thing I have an Extraordinary Journey. Give me that. So having answers to your opponents getting control of your synergy pieces is really, really important in this build.
Yeah, that's cool. Of course, you might exile that into the middle and they might have the what is it called? Enchanted Journey? Extraordinary Journey. Yeah, that's the scary part.
If you are into chaos theory and you just want to further the chaos, if you just want to lean into what
I don't know what anything could happen
Ian Malcolm brings to the table, you could play a Share the Spoils. That's even more cards of your opponents are available from exile. We talked about it earlier.
Now you have 2 separate pools of cards.
Yeah, like you can have one of these and you can have one of these. It's like Halloween candy.
Yeah, which one do you want? You can have both. Here you can have both. Go ahead. You got the mana.
Chaos theory, right? I like the idea of running like Wrong Turn in this deck, which is an instant that says target opponent gains control of target creature. So you can be like, look, I'll give you this back, but you have to not cast this. Be like,
deal.
You get that back.
There's a lot of cool political ramifications. That's true.
I like the idea of just including some cards with chaos in it.
The word chaos,
He's a chaotician. Do the thing. Play Throes of Chaos, which has both Cascade and Retrace. Who knows what you're going to get? Maybe it is something sweet.
Yep, that's cool.
And Retrace is really great because even if your opponents cast it, it goes to your graveyard and you can cast it.
Oh, so when it resolves, goes to your graveyard even if they cast it. Oh, okay. So that might be a roadmap for how to get some advantage, actually.
Yeah, is stuff that like even it's like, okay, you spent your mana on that, that's fine, but I still get that card. Is pretty sweet. Chaos Wand, of course, is really fun in this deck. I liked Chaos Mutation. It's 3 blue-red for an instant. Exile any number of target creatures controlled by different players. For each creature exiled this way, its controller reveals cards from the top of their library until they reveal a creature card, puts that card onto the battlefield, and then put the rest on the bottom in a random order. So it just gives you a little bit of a reroll where it's like, you're getting too much value out of that, or I'm just going to like, set you back in a sort of weird, chaotic way. I think this card's fun.
It has the word chaos. I do like the idea of just like
It's
putting a bunch of
chaos
cards
deck.
that, yeah.
You're like,
he's
it's a chaos
Chaotician.
deck, but it's just all the cards have chaos in it. You're not even running like chaos cards. Okay. Of course, with any amount of chaos in a deck, you are going to want a lever to pull when things go inevitably not your way.
Right. Homeward Path is the first thing I thought of in this because it has that ability to tap. Each player gains control of all creatures he or she owns. Yeah. The downside of this obviously is you give, everyone's going to get their stuff back. So anything you've got from them goes back as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thing is, you have this card, it's in your hand. You can choose not to cast their creatures,
right?
Knowing that you've got this, and let them cast yours and do other things, cast your own creatures out of your own hand, or cast instants and sorceries from the middle. So I think there's some amount of play there, and also you can play this and just never activate it. They can't really force you to activate it. So yeah.
You only activate it when it's good for you.
Yeah.
It's a brand deck. Just gain control of all permanents you control. All permanents you own.
Yep.
You can just be yoink. If they get it, that's unfortunate.
I like brand less because it's a spell.
Yeah.
Whereas Homeward Path is safer because
they can't play it out of it.
Yeah, they can only cast spells out of the middle. So that's scarier because now when it's advantageous to them, they have it. And that's the weird thing you have to think about in this deck, which is like keep going, this would be cool, but
it's really cool.
Half the time or something, they're going to be able to do that cool thing.
Yeah.
But maybe that's fine. Yeah, I think bounce spells are really smart because if you bounce a creature that somebody else has cast, but it's yours, you're the owner, it goes back to your hand, right?
Yeah.
The downside is that if you put bounce spells into the chaos pool in the middle, they can bounce their creatures that you control and put it back to their hand. But you put capsize down here, and I think it is smart because it has an additional advantage for you that the opponents don't have, which is you can buy it back.
Yeah.
But if an opponent pays buyback on a card you own, it will go back to your hand after it resolves.
Which is hilarious.
They would never do that, but that just means they don't get additional utility. So I like... This is a really cool and interesting deck because finding those places where, like, listen, they would have access to this card, but it's 50% as good for them and 100% as good for me, makes it like, how many of those can you find? Can you find 63 of those?
Something that we talked about is counter spells become really interesting. So the more counter spells that you have in your deck, you can only cast one thing from exile of your opponents on your turn.
Yes.
So on any of your counter spells that your opponents have access to are only like defensive counter spells for them. They can't use them to counter your stuff.
Yep. They have very limited utility when they're in that, I'm calling it the pool in the middle, the chaos pool.
Right.
Yeah. So a lot of counterspells seems to be like a good way to go because when you have them in your hand, they have full value. But when they're in the chaos pool in the middle, they have very little value because you can only cast it on, like your opponents can only cast it on your turn and they can only cast one thing from there. So if they're like, I'm going to cast this other thing from the pool, the counterspells do nothing. And a defensive only counterspell where it can only protect your plays is not as good as a counterspell that can also like stop an opponent during their turn from doing something that's going to beat you. So that's it's like capsize where like they get 20% use of a counterspell in there, but you get 100% use, if you draw it into your hand.
I want to mention some specific counterspells because they're neat. Remand is a great counterspell in this deck because it counters a spell and bounces it back to its owner's hand.
It's awesome.
So if they cast one of your spells, you remand it, boop, you draw that card and then draw the card from remand. So now you've counterspelled them and it's a 2-for-1.
It's so great.
Like, it's so powerful.
It's amazing.
Ugh, it's so fun.
The bounce spells to owner's hands rather than counter is the way to go. I would put as many of those as you can get that are
Narset's Reversal.
Oh my god, it's so good.
Is the next one. It's blue instant. Copy target instant or sorcery spell, then return it to its owner's hand. You may choose new targets for the copy. So you're like, cool, I'll take yours. Also my spell.
Yeah, I'll cast this. You won't also give me my card back. Thank you.
Delay, I had to look up the rules on.
Oh, this is weird. I heard you guys talking about it.
It's 1 and a blue for an instant. Counter target spell. If the spell is countered this way, exile it with 3 time counters on it instead of putting it into the owner's graveyard. If it doesn't have suspend, it gains suspend. So my question, I went running to Murph and was like, okay, what happens if they suspend a card I own? And he's like, they don't, you do.
Yeah, you suspended it.
So it, instead of going to your graveyard, it goes on suspend, not under your control, but in your suspend area.
When something unsuspends it assumes the owner of the card is the one casting it at that point.
Because it says at the beginning of its owner's upkeep, remove a time counter. So it shoots it into exile and it its owner removes the counters, which means when the owner removes it, they cast it.
So this is very good. You stop it from happening for them, and then make it inevitably going to happen for you.
Yeah. And it happens even sooner because supposedly you do it on their turn, so you remove the first counter right away.
See, I love this. I think
it's so cool.
So this is a deck that de facto made return target spell to its owner's hand like better than regular counter spell, which is cool. That's never happened before.
There's so many neat cards that go into this deck. And like you were talking about before, having spells that if they use it, you still have access to it, like Retrace, gives you that edge where like they use my card, sure, fine, but I also get to use my card.
Yeah, so there's any card that has flashback becomes a whole lot better because they get to use it out of the middle, but then it goes to your graveyard and you still get some value. You have a possibility of using it. Aftermath cards are another one of those. And I think, what's the Aftermath card? Commit to Memory that has the bounce target spell back to its owner's hand or whatever. Memory. Yeah, so like I think the Retrace, the Aftermath, the flashback, the bounce spells, like now you're getting close to, you need probably 35 or so cards. Then you've got all your Howling Minds and stuff and your regular ramp and stuff pieces, and now you're getting close to a full deck here of stuff. I mean, I love it. It sounds sweet.
I got to mention this before we go. It's Reality Scramble. It says, put target permanent you own on the bottom of your library. Reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a card that shares a card type with that permanent. Put that card on the battlefield. The rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Retrace.
Yeah. So you go, this is great. Yeah. Because it's great if you've got it in your hand because you just target one of your spells or your creatures or whatever that you own, get a new one.
Yeah.
But also, if they use it, you've got access to this from now on. That's awesome. Yeah.
So fun. This deck is wild. There's so many different, strange interactions, and so many cards become, super good or super bad or really dangerous. And that's Chaos Theory, baby.
That is the essence of chaos. All right. That's great. We have one left.
Is a big one.
Yep.
This is not from Jurassic Park. This is from Jurassic World.
Yeah. It is Indominus Rex Alpha. Okay, it's 1 green, and then 2 hybrid Dimir mana. So 5 mana total. You can either pay 1 blue, green, 1 black, green, or 1 blue, black, green.
Well done.
Thank you. So that's 5 CMC for a 6/6 legendary creature dinosaur mutant. As Indominus Rex Alpha enters the battlefield, discard any number of creature cards. It enters with a flying counter on it if a card discarded this way has flying. The same is true for First Strike, Double Strike, Death Touch, Hexproof, Haste, Indestructible, Lifelink, Menace, Reach, Trample, and Vigilance. When Indominus Rex enters the battlefield, draw a card for each counter on it. So at first it seems really like, geez, I would have to discard all these cards to give it these abilities, but Indominus is like, cool, I got you. I'll give you those cards back. And probably more than probably higher number of cards than you actually discarded.
Yeah, the first question here is you're like, okay, it's a keyword deck. We want cards with keywords on it. And specifically, we want more than one.
Yeah.
Because if you discard a creature with 1 keyword counter on it, you draw 1 card for it. But if you discard a creature with 2 keywords on it, you draw 2 and 3 and so on. So the more keywords, the more cards you can trade it for.
Yeah,
which is
of course,
wild.
if you discard multiple cards, they might overlap here and there. So it might be like 2 of them have flying, one's got Death Touch, one's got Trample. You're going to draw 3 overall for the 2 cards you discarded, but that's still good.
Right. Of course, you want to prioritize certain keywords that are just more powerful. Hexproof, Indestructible, Flying, even Vigilance. I think this deck is going to be, for the beginning, it's going to be very scary, and you're going to have 1 creature in play.
Yeah.
So something that gives you a big substantial protection is pretty good.
Yeah, I think Hexproof is the one you want above all.
For sure.
That's probably the number 1.
Yeah.
It might be Indestructible next. Yeah, but you're going to want as many creatures in the deck as you can with Hexproof and something else. And Hexproof might be important enough that even a few cards could maybe only have Hexproof, and that would be okay if they're good on their own.
Yeah, it is worth mentioning that there is no current way to give a double strike. There's no creatures with double strike.
I was surprised by this. I was like, really? There's no artifact
Damon
creature?
told me this, and I didn't believe him.
Yeah.
And I looked it up, and I can't. There's no.
Yeah, I thought there would be at least an artifact creature that has double strike, but there's not.
Not naturally, no.
Yeah, they're basically all in red and white.
Yeah. So, Don't look for them. They don't exist, I promise.
They put it on there, so they must have plans someday to... They're just leaving the possibility open.
Yeah.
I'm sure they don't have plans yet. Okay, so let's talk about the creatures that have the most keywords on them that we want.
Yeah.
There's not a lot that have 4.
Yeah. This one has 4, though, and it works from the graveyard, so it's amazing.
I mean, it's great. It's one of the best cards in the deck. It's Scavenge Brawler. It's 6 mana for a 4/4. It has Flying, Vigilance, Trample, and Lifelink. So if you discard just this...
Draw 4 cards.
You'll draw 4.
5 mana, draw 4.
Yeah.
Loot. Discard 1, draw 4.
It also has 5. Exile this from your graveyard. Choose target creature. Put 4 1/1 counters, a Flying counter, a Vigilance counter, a Trample counter, and a Lifelink counter on that creature. Activate only as a sorcery. So you get to discard this and then use it out of the graveyard to make another creature better later.
Yeah, I mean, and you can't do it in response to the trigger because it's only as a sorcery. But yeah, this card's just great. It's great from your graveyard. It's great with counters. And you clearly are going to have some sort of keyword synergy stuff going on in the deck. So I really like Elder Gargaroth in this deck. Vigilance, Reach, Trample, plus it's just a good card. That was the main thing that I was looking at is a lot of these have a ton of keywords, but they're not necessarily cards we play. And you don't want your deck to be full of those. Like you want cards that are like Baleful Strix has Flying and Death Touch. Those are both pretty good. And Baleful Strix on its own
play that card.
Is a great card.
Yeah. And you've got a 5-drop commander. You're probably going to want to cast Baleful Strix if it's in your hand early just to kind of help you get to the point. Because this is going to be more of a late game deck. Yeah. So I think you definitely want to have like cards that are actually useful and playable. You can see yourself actually casting them for the most part, but I think you can probably save yourself, 5 to 8 slots that are like, this is in here only to discard. I would never cast this card because it's inefficient or whatever.
Right, like this one.
Yeah. Night Veil Predator. Yeah, it's blue, black for a 3/3 Flying, Death Touch, Hexproof.
There you go.
Not good enough on its own, but yeah, it has the 2 of the 3 best keywords on it and the number 1 best one. Yeah. So, I think like Indestructible is the second best to Hexproof. You've got Kefnet the Mindful on here. It really is just kind of going to be a situation where within these colors, you just look for the most keywords that you can get on stuff that is playable.
Yeah, Yarok is really good on the battlefield or in your hand because it doubles that ETB and has Death Touch and Lifelink.
Oh yeah, draw twice as many cards.
Yeah.
That's sweet.
So there's that kind of thing. You want them to do both. I did want to mention before we move on from keywords, there are some creatures that have bizarre like variants of these. Oh
yeah, this is weird.
Yeah, so Thrasta Tempest's Roar is a dinosaur that has Trample, Haste, and Trample over Planeswalkers. The way that this works is Trample and Trample over Planeswalkers are both recognized by the dinosaur, but treated as different keywords.
So it'll get a Trample over Planeswalker's counter?
Yes.
Why?
Because it's Trample and it's different from regular Trample, I suppose.
It's so weird because it doesn't say, it lists off all those things it can get. It doesn't say Trample over Planeswalkers, but that's like a subversion of Trample.
Yeah, and it recognizes it as different. And
it's like you can get Trample A, Trample B, or Trample C, and this happens to be Trample C.
Yeah, like Eradicator Valkyrie has Hexproof from Planeswalkers, and that's counts as different from like traditional Hexproof.
Wow.
I don't know if that's good enough to put Eradicator Valkyrie in the deck, but it also has Flying and Lifelink.
So now it is good enough.
It's close.
No, it's 100% good enough.
It's very interesting that there's sort of that small...
That's weird.
Yeah, it seems bizarre.
Did you and Murph talk about that in your How to Read a Card?
It didn't come up. I'll be honest. It didn't... who knows? I'm doing my best with reading these. They keep making them weirder.
Yeah, that's a weird one.
Things that amplify the number of counters when it comes in are quite good. I think Vorinclex Monstrous Raider is the best version of this because it itself has Trample and Haste.
And it will just say, and it says any kind of counter, not +1/+1 or anything. Right. So it's like, you're going to get a Flying, a Lifelink, and a Hexproof. You get 2 Flyings, 2 Lifelinks, and 2 Hexproofs, draw 6.
Twice as many cards.
That's pretty sweet.
Yeah, so it's good on the battlefield or in your hand.
That's great.
Yep. Also, the Ozolith.
Oh, hey, the Ozolith. Have we told you about the Ozolith? You know what else might be good in this deck? Goldberry.
She does work at instant speed. You can move all the counters from Goldberry onto the dinosaur at instant speed, draw a card, and like trigger the draws more on that one.
Oh, like in response to the trigger?
Yeah. So if he enters the battlefield with all these counters, draw trigger, like ETB on the stack, you could use Goldberry to move all those counters onto it and draw even more cards.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. So we've talked a lot about moving counters around. You can do it and you'll draw a ton of cards. The problem is you're throwing all this stuff away.
Yeah, I mean, you are replacing it, so it's not a huge problem, but you should take advantage of the fact that, like, part of what you're doing is pitching creatures into the bin. Like, that is just part and parcel with what you're doing. So, yeah, there's got to be a recursion package of some kind.
Yeah.
Because you're in black and green, so you're good at it.
It's living death time.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, all of your stuff in the graveyard is hexproof and haste and trample and stuff. Go to business.
Yeah.
Start attacking. I think Agadim's Awakening's real strong in this deck as well. That card has overperformed for me every single time I've had it.
Yeah.
Even like a bag of holding that says when you discard stuff, it gets discarded into the bag, and you can crack the bag to return them all to your hand.
That's cool.
Gives you another, like if you blinkered the dinosaur or something, then it's real good.
Just reanimates and animate deads are going to be great, right?
Yeah.
Because you're just going to be able to get your Gargadon out for 1 or 2 mana. And that card's broken at 5 mana, so.
5 mana for 6/6 with 3 keywords. Yeah.
And you're going to have lifelink, so you're going to have a lot of life available to you, I think. So Command the Dreadhoard's probably really, really good, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, I think the recursion package, it doesn't have to be huge, but it's going to be a powerful way for, like, you're going to cast your commander, discard a bunch of cards, draw a bunch of cards, and then that turn after that is going to be really scary.
Yeah. You're like, what's it?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a sweet deck. It's like counters draw graveyard. I haven't really seen a deck like it, and it's on a huge dinosaur. So
very cool stuff.
Bonus.
Very cool stuff. All right.
That's it.
Those are the 12 commanders we're talking about in this episode. We got to do what we always do here before we go, Rachel. Let's talk about what each of our favorite commanders that we talked about today are, which would be our favorite commanders from the entire set, because if we had a different card we liked, we would have talked about it on this episode.
Yeah. We've covered them.
Yeah, we're the ones that get to choose what cards we talk about. So,
unless they're the face commanders or the precons, I don't tend to talk about them here. But those are cool.
That's true, because we talk about them. They have whole episodes devoted to them.
They're good.
I'll start first.
Sure.
My favorite is Xolatoyac, the Smiling Flood.
Yeah, look at him.
Yeah, very cute, first of all. Very cute. And it's untapping things, which is like my favorite thing to do.
Yeah,
so,
that too. You could have all your mana up for capsize.
I would say I do really like your favorite. It's close to my favorite. I just don't want to steal yours.
It's Ian Malcolm, Chaotician.
That deck seems sweet.
It's awesome. I mean, Remand is such a fun spell to cast anyway, and if you can cast it in Commander, even better.
Well, also that feels like the type of deck where you really, every game will be different, and you're not going to know what's going to happen, because so much of it is predicated on what your opponents do, what's flipped off the top, and also you're going to have to use their pieces to piece together a win. Yeah. So, yeah, I really think it's cool. And I think it will actually, for the most part, feel okay, because you're not stealing stuff from other people exactly. Yeah. They're stealing stuff too, but it's not stealing. It's not taking a resource, directly. Right. It's just
closer to mill.
Yeah, I think so. So,
which people love.
People love mill. We've heard this. Yeah.
The most powerful commander in this episode,
I tried to think of a
Caverns of Ixalan.
Yeah, I tried to come up with another one so we wouldn't have the same one, but in the end, I couldn't.
Yeah, he's hard to beat, I think. This is Ojer Axonil, Deepest Might. This commander is just so explosive. It's just one turn and you're dead.
Yeah, this is the mono red one that all non-combat damage you deal, it becomes equal to its power. Yeah, basically. So yeah, it feels like it's going to be pretty fast. It's going to hit really hard, and optimized versions of it feel like they're going to be quite strong.
Yeah, make a lot of mana all in one turn. I think it's going to be comparable to like Neheb type stuff, where you got to be ready or for the Neheb turn, or you're going to be dead.
Right. It's probably not most powerful in terms of like CDH or whatever, because it doesn't have blue in it. So
that's true. Mono red stuff.
Yeah.
Unless you're Godo.
But most powerful as sort of an optimized casual deck.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. To the listeners, which commander do you think is the most powerful from what we just talked about, or even from the ones we didn't discuss? Yeah. What's your favorites? Did we miss any that you think, it's crazy you missed that? This one's awesome for these reasons. Tell us the reasons. Are you planning on building any of the commanders we talked about today? What are the hot pieces of tech that we missed? Please let us know in the comments, Twitter, Discord.
Yeah.
Email if you feel like it.
Get in the email.
Yeah.
We love a professional correspondence.
Yeah, a good couple of paragraphs.
We talked about a lot of Magic cards today. If you want to pick up any of these, any of the cards from Lost Caverns of Ixalan, go to cardkingdom.com/command. It's the easiest way to support the show while doing something you already love, which is buying dinosaurs on cardboard. This set is awesome. There's so many powerful new cards. There's so many complicated mechanics that are like to figure out. I think craft is going to be a really interesting part of Commander. Yeah. So look at all of these cards. Keep an eye on prices. Go to Card Kingdom. Pick up the ones that you want for your deck, or get yourself the sealed products. There's still set boosters and draft boosters. And of course, I'm a big fan of these precons. You can get all of that at Card Kingdom and get it in one safe package to your doorstep. cardkingdom.com/command.
And of course, once you get your hands on all that stuff, you want to protect it. You want it to look awesome on your battlefield. ULTRAPRO.com/command is the best place to go to get all your game accessories. That is the brand that Jimmy and I, we trust our own collections to. Getting really excited about Apex sleeves, which are coming out, we're assured, pretty soon. I'm actually just waiting on those to come out because I want to resleeve a bunch of my decks.
Yeah, I'm working on a cube. I need them.
Yeah. Having used them, I can't imagine sleeving in anything else at this point. So I'm literally just waiting till they are wide release so I can resleeve like 7 of my decks, because they're a little long in the tooth these days and getting a little dirty. So again, ultrapro.com/command if you want to get your hands on stuff and find discounts. And also, if you want to find out about Apex sleeves, we've got links in the show notes. Yeah, they're very, very cool. Okay.
It is time.
It's time.
It's
we know
time.
We appreciate.
If you auditioned, hello.
Audition
it's
people.
This moment.
We're waving our hands so that those people that skipped forward can easily find this moment, because we know you skipped from the beginning and you're here now, and hopefully you'll watch the review we just took 2.5 hours on after this. Okay, so yeah, we got hundreds of submissions. We did our due diligence. We went through them. I want to say that the process here, most people within the Command Zone team they have a say in the vote. Everybody at some point gets to weigh in. Mm-hmm. So everybody feels that they're a part of picking the fan guest, because we really like that about it. And the process is awesome. We love seeing our fans. You're all so genuine and passionate, and there were so many people that we were like, man, they would be great to hang out with and to have on game nights. And, we can unfortunately only pick 2 every single year. There's only so many game nights episodes, but I don't want people who audition and aren't picked to feel discouraged. You're all great. There's so many of you that it could be. It's just the reality that we can only pick a couple. And, to kind of give a little pep talk to the people that maybe are auditioning for the first time or whatever. There are many guests on Game Nights fan episodes that got picked on their second or third audition.
Yeah.
And there's people I remember from years past that are like, oh, this person has been near the top, the last 2 or 3 times. And I hope they keep auditioning, because, we're looking for a spot to pick them, and they definitely could get in at some point. So, okay. Yeah. With all that out of the way, let's announce our 2 Game Nights audition winners for this year. I guess we shouldn't announce it. We can just play the clip.
Yeah, why don't we let them introduce themselves?
Okay, if you see your face,
it's you.
It's you.
My name is Saul Padilla. I'm 27 years old. I'm from Austin, Texas. My favorite Commander story is actually very recent, because my wife Sydney actually started playing recently. And so I'm swinging with a lot of damage, and I'm doing the math, and I'm looking at everyone's single-digit life, and I realize I can only take out 2 players. I swing out at the 2 of them. I love my wife, and she swings at me with Yoshimaru for a 1/1, taking out my 1 life, and I got the Queen Mix for my wife, which was just great.
All right, congratulations to Saul Padilla. We're very excited to meet you soon, Saul. We're going to email you in a couple of days, but we like the idea that the first time you find out is watching the episode.
Seeing your face? Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It's way cooler than if you just saw an email one day and then watched it. So we're going to wait a couple of days, and then we will email both people.
Yeah. And there is, of course, a second fan that is going to get to play on game nights, and we'll let them introduce themselves.
My name is Ali Geyer. I was playing Blim Comedic Genius, and this deck gives me a reason to play objectively bad cards. I gave her a card called Nefarious Lich. The only text that matters, if this enchantment were to leave play, you lose the game. I Chaos Warped the Nefarious Lich, and then she lost the game, and I had just enough damage on board to swing out and kill him. But that's the great thing about Commander, is you can take an objectively bad card and find a perfect spot for it in a Commander deck.
All right.
All right.
Congratulations to Ali Geyer. Thank you both so much for your audition. It was so wonderful, again, meeting all of you, seeing all of your faces. We're so excited to have both Ali and Saul come play on game nights. Congratulations.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. We're going to fly you out to Los Angeles. You're going to be playing, your decks sitting across the table from us on game nights. We will be contacting you again in a few days to start talking about those particulars. We will probably film sometime in the first half of next year. And, it's months and months away before the episode comes out, but it will come out, and we will be contacting you soon. Again, thanks to everybody who auditioned. Hope those people that didn't get chosen don't take it too hard. Again, it's just an impossible thing for not to disappoint some people. But man, overall, biggest takeaway was I love our community. Everybody out there is great. So many of you are so passionate, so genuine, so much charisma. Riz, as the kids say, I should say. So much Riz. Oh my gosh. I
don't know the kids anymore.
My nieces are rolling their eyes. They're like, Uncle Josh, don't say Riz. Don't say that. Seriously, though, everybody did a great job. We're really impressed. We can't wait. We are going to be doing extra turns auditions, hopefully for the first time pretty soon. So we'll talk about how that's going to work.
Yeah, we get a lot of auditions. We only have so many slots. Let's make some more slots.
Yeah. Okay, everybody. Thanks for hanging out with us. Big thanks to our amazing team here at the Command Zone, which is Damon Lenz, Eric Lem, Megan Yip, Gaurav Galati, Jordan Pridgeon, Jamie Block, Arthur Meadowcroft, Manson Lung, Josh Murphy, Jake Boss, Sam Waldo, Evan Limburger, Katie Cole, Mitch Trafford, and of course, our good buddy, Jimmy Wong.
Mine always goes straight up. It's
There you go.
See, that hit you.
That was a good one. That's great. That's great. It's dynamic.
Bye, everybody.
Peace.
Thank you for your attention. For further inquiries, send an email to commandcast@rocketjump.com or ask us on Twitter @JFWong and @JoshLeeQuai. See you later, alligator.
Greetings, humans.